Chapter 105. Pang Xiao leaned forward, one hand on the edge of the Arhut bed, the other pointing to the corner of his mouth. His eyes were wide open, and his thin lips were slightly pouted as he looked at her with a smile. "You said I have a broken mouth? How is my mouth broken? Why don't I feel it?" Qin Yining was almost dazzled by his handsome face that suddenly came close to her. She blushed and stepped back to hide. "You are so boring. I said your mouth is too bad, and you always bully people. I didn't say your mouth is really broken." "Is that so?" Pang Xiao had already gotten off the bed. Looking at her blushing cheeks, he couldn't help but bend over with his hands behind his back. He leaned closer to her and said slowly, "Then I misunderstood." Qin Yining looked up and met his dark and deep eyes. His eyes were very beautiful, his nose was tall and straight, and his lips were thin and the corners of his mouth were upturned. At this time, his mouth was closed seriously, but she still felt that he seemed to be smiling. Qin Yining suddenly realized that she was staring at Yao Zhishi's face. She hurriedly lowered her eyes, and her gaze fell on his Adam's apple, which was half exposed outside his snow-white collar. It seemed that something was wrong here. Qin Yining simply turned her head to look elsewhere. Pang Xiao laughed and pretended not to care as he paced in front of her with his hands behind his back. Although he didn't look at her, his attention was on her. "Say, Teske, I didn't expect you to be such a woman who knows how to accept her fate. It's different from what I thought. I thought you would run away directly. At this juncture, if I ran away, what would happen to my family? They don't treat you well, and they didn't raise you. You have to sacrifice yourself for them. Are you willing? They may not be sincere to me, and they didn't raise me in the past. But what have I done for them? I'm not a gold ingot. Do you think everyone will like me when they see me?" Pang Xiao was stunned when he heard this, and then he laughed. "That's not necessarily true." "What?" Qin Yining looked at him in confusion. "I like you when I saw you." Qin Yining's mind went blank. His cheeks instantly flushed red, and the corners of his lips quivered. He didn't know how to respond. Pang Xiao was also surprised that he had said something like that. He coughed and tried to salvage the situation. "It's your fault for looking so much like our big white." "Dubai?" Qin Yining asked in a daze. Pang Xiao smiled. "My mother has a pug with snow-white fur. It's silly and greedy. My mother named it White. There's also a wolfhound named Dahe. They're a pair." "You!" Qin Yining glared angrily at the person in front of him. The awkwardness and shyness he felt earlier had disappeared, and he couldn't tell what he was feeling now. He always liked to tease her. His identity was unclear, and his words were half-truths. Qin Yining couldn't tell which words were true and which were false. He only knew that he always made her so angry that her teeth itched when she saw him. She wanted to just ignore him, but he wasn't really that annoying. If she paid attention to him, he would always take advantage of her. She really didn't know what to do with him. However, when she thought about the upcoming trip to the peace talks, and the fact that she didn't know if she would be able to come back alive, Qin Yining didn't want to sort out the tangled emotions in his heart. He didn't care anymore. "If it weren't for the fact that you saved my life, I would definitely beat you up." Qin Yining snorted in frustration. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "You want to beat me up? Or give me a massage?" "Young Master Yao, I really don't want to joke with you. In fact, even if you didn't send me a letter, I would still come to see you. I don't know if I'll survive this trip. Perhaps this will be our farewell forever. I still haven't repaid you for saving my life, and I feel very guilty." Qin Yining stood up and called Bing Tang over. Bing Tang said that the poison in your body will be cured in 3 or 4 days. "I can rest assured. I have already told Master Zhong that if anything happens in the future, if I'm not here, you can come to Master Zhong. Although Zhao Yin Agency isn't a big business, and you may not care about it, you still have some connections. Although this can't be considered repaying you, it is the only thing I can arrange for now." Qin Yining finished speaking and called Bing Tang. "Go and give young Master Yao acupuncture." Pang Xiao frowned as he looked at her back. Her satin black hair and snow-white dress made him feel like she was a person in an ink painting that could float away at any time. She was considered tall among women, but she only reached his shoulders. Such a delicate little girl was forced to bear so much helplessness. From childhood to adulthood, she had no control over anything. How similar was her fate to his? Qin Si. Pang Xiao called out to stop her, as if he was possessed. Qin Yining turned around. What is it? It's nothing. Don't worry. Qin Yining blinked in confusion. He didn't understand what Pang Xiao meant by don't worry, but he still smiled and said, I'll go talk to Master Zhong and have Bing Tang stay to treat you. Young Master Yao, let's part here. Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. He waved his hand and said, It's fine. You can go. He turned around and took off his cloak. Qin Yining didn't stay any longer and went to talk to Master Zhong. The news that Qin Yining was going to follow Qin Huaiyuan to participate in the peace talks had already spread throughout the world. Many people were cursing the incapable ruler behind his back. When Master Zhong heard the news, he was so upset that he couldn't sleep that night. Now that he saw Qin Yining, Master Zhong almost cried in front of him. He repeatedly cursed, How muddle-headed. Master is such a good person. Why did he have to be involved in such a thing? The most important thing for a girl is her reputation. If he really went to Shihua City, realizing that his words would cause Qin Yining to panic, Master Zhong wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. What a sin! Qin Yining could feel Master Zhong's concern for him. He smiled and personally poured a cup of tea for him. I've always thought that I was lucky. When I was young, I was abandoned in the wilderness and should have been eaten by wild wolves long ago. Instead, I was picked up by my foster mother. When I was 7 years old, my foster mother was critically ill. I had originally decided to sell myself in exchange for money to treat her illness. However, I met a kind person who gave me a sum of money. When I was 8 years old, my foster mother died of illness. I went deep into the mountains by myself. I thought that one day I would die. Who would have thought that I would be lucky enough to survive? Later, I thought that I would most likely have to hunt for the rest of my life. However, my father's men found me. At this point, Qin Yining looked at Master Zhong with a smile and comforted him. It can be seen that in a person's life, if you don't take the last step, you will never be able to determine whether what is in front of you is good luck or bad luck. Master Zhong was infected by Qin Yining's optimistic attitude. His heart was suddenly filled with pride. Master's young miss is really broad-minded. This old man has lived for so many years, but I can't compare to young Mississippi. Master Zhong really knows how to joke. In fact, to tell you the truth, I'm really scared to death. However, when it comes to the end, what's the use of being scared? Just like how we all know that we will die when we are born. Don't we want to live? Even if we are scared, we still have to live. When the boat comes to the bridge, it will cross the bridge. We can only resign ourselves to fate. Master Zhong heard this and couldn't help but smile. Isn't that true? Qin Yining explained a bit to Master Zhong. In the end, he said in a low voice, I'm afraid that I won't have much luck. If I don't come back, the Emperor may take back Zhao Yun Agency for his own use. Previously, when the Emperor didn't seize Dinggua Manor, he was already thinking about Zhao Yun Agency's property. If something happens to me, the Emperor will be justified in taking back this place. Master Zhong is the old shopkeeper of Zhao Yun Agency. The Emperor won't treat you unfairly. However, I'm worried about my grandmother and the others. When Qin Yining was here, she could use the convenience of her identity to rent out the womenfolk of Dinggua Manor and raise them with money. However, once she was gone, the Emperor would become the owner of Zhao Yun Agency. He wouldn't raise people to eat for free. Master Zhong sighed and said, Master, my words carry little weight. I can't guarantee anything. However, I can promise you that within the scope of my ability, I will definitely help Old Master's madam. When Old Master was here, he treated me well. You also saved my family's life. I haven't repaid this kindness yet. If something really happens to you, you can rest assured that I will do my best to take care of them. If it really doesn't work, I will give them a sum of money to let them escape. Qin Yining nodded and said gratefully, Thank you very much. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Now that she was about to fall, even her own cousins and grandmother wanted to step on her a few times. However, Master Zhong didn't hit her when she was down. He even promised to help the widow of Dinggua Manor. Qin Yining was very touched. While she was talking to Master Zhong, the Bing Tang acupuncture treatment for Pang Xiao was already done. Qin Yining took the maidservants back to Qin Manor. For the next few days, Qin Yining didn't go out. He only stayed in Xingning Garden to serve the Sun Clan. The Sun Clan suffered a series of blows. First, they learned that the daughter they raised for 14 years was a fake. Then, Sun Yuanming died, and all the men of Dinggua Manor were executed. Then, Qin Huaiyuan took Madame Chao as his concubine. The huge difference in everyone's attitude towards her became the straw that broke her back. Now, Qin Yining was going to be offered to an old sex fiend. He might not even be able to come back alive. The relationship between the Sun Clan and Qin Yining was just getting better. How could she bear to see her daughter jump into the fire pit? Under the combined attacks of several factors, Madame's son fell ill. Qin Yining was busy taking care of the sick every day. He didn't care about anything else. In the blink of an eye, 8 days passed. On the 15th day of the first lunar month, Nanny Zhan and Qin Yining said goodbye and returned to the palace. Before leaving, Qin Yining sincerely bowed and thanked Nanny Zhan. In this short month, Qin Yining learned a lot from Nanny Zhan and benefited a lot. Nanny Zhan looked at Qin Yining's beautiful face and only thought of the 4 words, "Beautiful women are short-lived." Unfortunately, she was just a maidservant. She was like duckweed and really couldn't help Qin Yining. She could only helplessly say goodbye. During the Lantern Festival, the Warm Room Banquet was held. The atmosphere of the family Qin was a bit depressing. Old Madam picked up the wine cup and sighed. The peace negotiation team will set off tomorrow. Has Sister Yi's luggage been properly packed? Qin Yining nodded. Yes, everything has been properly packed. That's good. As soon as Old Madam finished speaking, Mammy Qin walked in with an extremely unsightly expression. Old Madam Masters. On the other side of the large mahogany carved screen, Qin Huaiyuan and the other men put down their silver chopsticks and looked at Mammy Qin at the door. Chapter 106. Everyone present knew what Nanny Yinchi did. Qin Yining was an unmarried young lady. Even if Qin Huaiyuan was going to take her to the old sex fiend in Dezhou, she couldn't brazenly call a nanny to teach her how to serve a man. She wasn't going to get married, and she wasn't one of those prostitutes and brothels who wanted to sell their bodies. The Empress was humiliating the family Qin and slapping the family Qin's face in public. Qin Yining pursed her lips. She knew that the Demon Empress was going to make trouble before she left. Everyone present didn't have a good expression. The Sun Clan had been sick for the past few days and was very weak. Today, they barely managed to get up to attend the Lantern Festival banquet. Who would have thought that they would receive such news? They were so angry that their heads buzzed and their vision turned black. If it weren't for Mother Jin's sharp eyes, the Sun Clan would have fallen down. The 3rd young lady, 7th young lady, and 8th young lady looked at Qin Yining with helplessness and pity in their eyes. Only the 6th young lady rolled her eyes at Qin Yining and secretly scolded her for asking for it. She was reprimanded by her father and grounded by her mother to copy the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. It was only this morning that her confinement was lifted. Qin Huaining used a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes and said worriedly, "She's already like this before she leaves. What will happen when she leaves? Will Sister Yi come back alive?" Everyone thought so, but only Qin Huaining said those words to block Qin Yining's heart. Old Madam, 2nd Madam, and 3rd Madam all felt that Qin Huaining was too impersonal to speak like this in such an occasion. However, because Chao Yuqing was also present, they didn't dare to offend her and didn't say anything to stop her. The Sun Clan was so angry that they coughed again and glared at Qin Huaining with ashen faces. They didn't expect that after raising her for 14 years, she would raise an enemy. Qin Huaining smugly looked at the quiet Qin Yining and the miserable Sun Clan. Unexpectedly, Chao Yuqing frowned and reprimanded her. "Qin Huaining, are you talking like a human? Shut up." Qin Huaining's eyes widened in shock. He didn't come back to his senses for a long time. She didn't understand why Chao Yuqing kept speaking up for Qin Yining. Why did everyone in this family like to Qin Yining? Why did everyone target her? The fight between the women folk only lasted for a moment. On the other side of the screen, Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Shuyuan all looked solemn. Among the younger generation, First Master Qin Yu and Second Master Qin Han were somewhat unable to remain calm. Qin Han had a chivalrous heart and loved to fight for justice. Now, he slammed the table and stood up, saying anxiously, "Uncle, we can't let others bully Fourth Sister like this." Fourth Sister's participation in the peace talks was an imperial order that could not be disobeyed. For the sake of the country, what was the meaning of sending such a person? What does she think our family's legitimate daughter is? If we let that nanny Yinshi in like this, won't people look down on our family? Qin Han's words also reminded the womenfolk on the other side of the screen. Second Madam and Third Madam's faces gradually became solemn. Their hands unconsciously grasped their lapels tightly, wrinkling their lapels. If they really let Nanny Yinshi in, they were afraid that all kinds of rumors would spread. Where would the dignity of family Qin's daughters go? Not to mention other things, their second and third branches still had unmarried daughters. Second Madam and Third Madam both looked at the Sun Clan for help. However, the Sun Clan only cared about being angry and didn't look at them. Presumably, she didn't have extra brain power to think about this. The two looked at Old Madam, but Old Madam just lowered her head and drank tea. She didn't look at them or anyone else. The two knew that Old Madam had thought of everything, but she refused to say anything. She was afraid of offending the Demon Empress's sister. The two mothers were so angry that their faces turned red, but their hearts were cold. What kind of mother-in-law did they have? Second Madam hesitated and was about to speak, but unexpectedly, Qin Yining said first, "Father, you have to think twice about this. Your daughter is destined to be abandoned, but there are other sisters in the family. They still have to be human." His words made Second Madam and Third Madam look at Qin Yining gratefully. The girls now also realized the seriousness of the matter, and they nervously frowned. Some of them lowered their heads in silence, and their emotions couldn't be seen clearly. Some looked at Qin Yining gratefully, and some, like Qin Huaining and Sixth Miss, angrily glared at Qin Yining, resenting her for implicating them. Qin Huayun slowly stood up, walked to the door with his hands behind his back, and ordered Mammy Qin, "Call someone here." "Yes." Mammy Qin answered and retreated. Not long after, a 35-year-old woman wearing a red dress with floral patterns walked in quickly. She had makeup on her face and wore a big red silk flower on her head. She was dressed very jubilantly. Seeing Qin Huai, Mama Yinshi bowed and said with a smile, "Greetings, Grand Preceptor Qin. This servant greets Grand Preceptor Qin and all the masters." Qin Huayuan nodded slightly and said, "What's your surname, Mama?" I don't dare. This servant's surname is Jiang." "Yes, Mama Jiang." Qin Huayuan smiled and asked gently, "Did you come here today because of the Empress's order or the Emperor's order?" Mama Jiang quickly looked up at Qin Huayuan. She wanted to say something with a smile, but although Qin Huayuan's smile was gentle, his eyes were too cold. Mama Jiang's smile almost froze, and she hurriedly bowed again respectfully. "Grand Preceptor, this is the Empress's verbal order." Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "Servants, prepare a carriage and send Mama Jiang back to the palace." Mama Jiang widened her eyes in astonishment. Old Madam, who had been silent, suddenly stood up and rushed out of the screen. She grabbed Qin Huayuan's sleeve and said, "Brother Ming, you can't." Seeing Old Madam like this, Second Madam and Third Madam almost wanted to learn from the Sun Clan and scold this extremely selfish and wicked woman. Even Second Master and Third Master knitted their brows and pursed their lips. Qin Huayuan didn't get angry because he knew Old Madam's temperament too well. He only comforted her and said, "Mother, don't worry. Your son has his own ideas. I'll tell you later." Old Madam looked at Qin Huayuan hesitantly. After a long time, she slowly nodded. Qin Huayuan instructed Mammy Qin, "Wrap a big red envelope and give it to Mama Jiang." He turned to Mama Jiang and said with a gentle smile, "Mama Jiang, please go back to the palace and give a message to the Empress for this official." "Yes, this servant will definitely do it." "Grand Preceptor, please say it. I will remember the Empress's good intentions. In the future, if the Qin Manor marries a daughter, I will definitely ask Mama Yinshi to come and serve." This was a warning to the Empress. Family Qin wasn't marrying a daughter. There was no need for her to pretend to be kind. Mama Zhang's face turned pale. She hesitated and said, "But the Empress's verbal order. If the Empress insists, then please ask the Emperor to issue an imperial edict. When I see the imperial edict, I will definitely do it." The implication was that if they didn't disobey the imperial edict, they would be loyal and patriotic. The dignified Grand Preceptor Qin's manner wouldn't put a harem girl like you in their eyes. Such a tough attitude showed that they were angry and wanted to go against the Empress. Some of the family Qin people were secretly happy. Some were worried and almost fainted like old madam. However, Chao Yuqing stood up and said to Mama Jiang, "Go back and tell Chao Yuro not to meddle in our family's affairs. Just take care of her own stall." Mama Jiang's cold sweat flowed down. Chapter 107. Nanny Jiang could only respond on the surface, but the cold sweat on her back had soaked her undergarments. She could not reply, but she didn't dare to repeat Qin Huaiyuan's words to the Empress. She still wanted to live. Qin Huaiyuan pursed his lips and stood in place with his hands behind his back. He didn't want to care about whether Nanny Jiang was embarrassed or not. These people were used to bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Today, they were facing a tough person. If they were facing a soft person, these wicked servants would be more black-hearted than ordinary people. There was no reason that he couldn't get angry when being bullied. Chao Yuqing looked at Qin Huaiyun softly and said, "Leoi, let this concubine follow this nanny into the palace. I will explain to the Empress. After all, it's more convenient for sisters to talk. We are all in-laws. It's not good to cause misunderstandings." Good. Yuqing, we have to trouble you with today's matter. Old Madam let out a long sigh and patted Chao Yuqing's hand intimately. "Old Madam, what are you talking about? Since this concubine entered the family Qin, this concubine is a member of the family Qin. How can this concubine look at our family's joke?" Chao Yuqing looked at Qin Huaiyuan with a smile. "Leoi, what do you think?" Qin Huaiyuan looked at Chao Yuqing and pondered for a moment. He nodded and cupped his hands. "Then, I'll have to trouble you." Seeing him so polite, Chao Yuqing's eyes dimmed for a moment. She immediately returned the greeting. "Leoi is too polite. This concubine will go now. If it's late today, this concubine will stay with the Empress and come back tomorrow. Leoi and old Madam can rest assured." After saying that, Chao Yuqing called Nanny Jiang and went out with her personal maidservant. Old Madam put her palms together and bowed to the sky. "Ba. Fortunately, we have such a virtuous person in our family. She's not like the kind of person who only knows how to cause trouble and only knows how to cause trouble. She's not helpful to the family at all." Obviously, she was talking about the Sun clan. Qin Huaiyun frowned and said, "Mother, it's getting late. We have to leave tomorrow. I'll go back and make some preparations." Without waiting for old Madam's reply, he turned around the screen and walked towards the Sun clan. He said softly, "Let's go back." The Sun clan's members' tears slid down at once. The anger of being scolded indirectly by old Madam just now had disappeared. He nodded and gave in. After the two of them walked far away, old Madam came back to her senses and said awkwardly, "Let's disperse for today. Tell them to go back and prepare." With the sudden change in mood, everyone lost interest in continuing. They all bowed and retreated. Qin Yining returned to the master's study and went to bed after washing up as usual. The next morning, the accompanying officials from the Ministry of Rites were already waiting outside the Fu. Qin Yining followed Qin Huaiyuan to bid farewell to the family. After listening to old Madam's exhortations such as, "You must be sensible and obedient," she took Bingtang and Song Lan and boarded the 8 treasure tassel carriage that was specially prepared for her. Opening the window, Qin Yining lifted the water-blue tasseled curtain with her white hand. She took off her hood and looked up at the main entrance of Qin Fu. Under the gloomy winter sun, the golden words Qin Fu on the signboard were so dazzling that she couldn't help but squint her eyes. The white walls and black tiles extended in 2 directions, encircling the huge family Qin. The womenfolk dressed in red and green, surrounded by pearls and jade, stood in front of the door. Regardless of whether they were sincere or not, everyone's eyelashes were filled with tears as they looked at her reluctantly. The Sun Clan's member leaned on Mother Jin's shoulder and cried his heart out. This family might not be warm. However, the existence of this residence gave her a place to return to. She just didn't expect that the affairs of the world were unpredictable. She had just found a true home, and now she had to leave again. She didn't even know if she could return. Qin Huaiyuan's splendid red carriage was in front of Qin Yining's carriage. At this time, he was also leaning against the window and looking out. The accompanying officials from the Ministry of Rites saw that the auspicious hour was approaching and urged their horses forward, cupping their hands and saying, "Darren, the time has come." Qin Huaiyun nodded and said, "Then let's set out." As he spoke, he let down the curtain. Hearing this, Qin Yining smiled at the Sun Clan and Xiu Lu and the others beside the Sun Clan. She also let down the curtain and closed the window. Before she left, she had entrusted the servants of the master's study to Mother Jin to take care of. At this point, the people related to her had already been arranged. Even if she couldn't return, she wouldn't be worried. Actually, she didn't want to bring along Bing Tang and Song Lan. It was the two of them who insisted on following. Song Lan shouted that she wanted to throw herself into the Demon Empress, while Bing Tang prepared poison and wanted to perish together with the Demon Empress. Qin Yining talked until her mouth was dry, but she still wouldn't listen to them. Thus, she could only bring them along. The carriage swayed as the procession slowly moved forward. The Sun Clan's member pulled on Mother Jin's hand and chased after them. Choking with sobs, she said loudly, "Sister Yi, you must come back. I'll wait for you to come back." Qin Yining's suppressed sorrow of separation was aroused by her mother's words. She forcefully closed her eyes and raised her head. Only then did she hold back the tears that were about to flow out. The Sun Clan's member watched as the procession gradually moved further away and sobbed silently. "That child has only been back for 2 months. I haven't even treated her well." A friend in need was a friend indeed. Today, the Sun Clan no longer doubted Qin Yining and could truly see who in this residence truly treated her well. Qin Yining was truly filial and wholeheartedly wanted what was best for her. However, when she had the ability to take care of her, she didn't treat her well. The Sun Clan now regretted that they had done so. Mother Jin, third young miss, and eighth young miss were all consoling her. Fourth young miss will definitely return safely. Madam, don't worry. That's right, eldest aunt. Fourth sister is brave and resourceful. She will definitely return safely. The Dowager Duchess's heart also didn't feel good. In the end, she was still a beautiful girl. Moreover, her appearance and temperament were similar to her most beloved son. However, the situation was like this. They had no choice but to accept their fate. "Let's go back." The Dowager Duchess sighed. Unexpectedly, just as she finished speaking, she heard the sound of hurried horse hooves approaching from afar. Everyone turned their heads to look and saw the Crown Prince, wearing a light purple cloak with a white fox fur collar, quickly approaching. Behind him, a group of eunuchs wearing iron-gray cotton clothes hastily urged their horses to chase after him. Yu Qiyin didn't dismount and anxiously asked, "Where is fourth young miss? Has she already left?" He didn't ask Qin Huaiyuan, the Grand Tutor, but instead asked Qin Yining. How could anyone not understand the Crown Prince's thoughts? If it wasn't for the Emperor's edict this time, their family might have a Crown Prince consort. In the future, they might even have an Empress. When the Dowager Duchess thought of this, it was as if someone had gouged out a knife in her heart. She wrung her hands and shook her head. "Gone, already gone. Gone?" Yu Qian's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Qin Yining wasn't willing to be humiliated and committed suicide? Seeing the Crown Prince's face instantly turn pale, the second madam on the side hurriedly said, "Your Highness, fourth young miss just set off with Grand Tutor Qin. If you quickly catch up now, you will definitely be able to make it." Only then did Yu Qiyin seem to come back to life. Color gradually returned to his face. He nodded to the second madam, the Dowager Duchess, and the others, then spurred his horse to catch up. "Your Highness, your Highness." "Ayo!" The eunuchs also hurriedly chased after the Crown Prince. The traveling group chose the main road that was sparsely populated, but Yu Yin panicked and didn't choose the right path. He chased along the market and naturally didn't find them. When he reached the North City gate, he discovered that the carriage hadn't arrived yet. Yu Yin wanted to turn back. It was the accompanying eunuch who advised him, "If your highness goes back, what if you get lost again? It's better for your highness to wait on the road outside the city." Yu Yin slapped her forehead and let out a long sigh. This queen was panicking. He calmed his mind and chose a forest 20 li outside the city to wait. In the forest, Pang Xiao and Huzi were perched on a thick tree and eating steamed buns. When they heard footsteps coming from outside, the two slowly stopped eating. Huzi whispered, "Master, it seems that someone is coming." Pang Xiao stuffed the last bite of the steamed bun into his mouth, and his cheeks puffed up. Huzi also ate the steamed bun and stood up to look in the direction of the official road. He whispered, "It seems that he is coming to see you off." Looking at his clothes and the people accompanying him, this person should be the dying crown prince. Pang Xiao leisurely wrapped the fine cotton cloak tightly around his body. He was too lazy to speak. Huzi secretly rolled his eyes. When he saw Miss Qin, he became a ruffian and chatterbox. He didn't even bother to say a word to him. The difference in treatment was too obvious. Huzi sat down beside Pang Xiao and whispered, "Master, should we take the opportunity to kill him?" Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows. "You are one of the dying emperor's men?" Huzi was stunned and shook his head blankly. "No. Then why are you still helping that bastard?" Although the Yin emperor only had one heir, Yu Yin, he was also suspicious and guarded against his own son. He was old, but he refused to admit his old age. He had been occupying the position and hoped that his eldest son would die, so that he would have one less threat. "Keep him." Pang Xiao lazily closed his eyes. Huzi whispered, "But we don't have to wait here. With the speed of their carriage, no matter how slow they are, they will arrive at Xihua City in 2 days. What problem can there be in 2 days?" Pang Xiao closed his eyes as if he didn't hear him. Huzi knew that he was ignored again, so he could only squat on the branch and play with the bark. Not long after, the sound of carriages and horses came from the official road. Pang Xiao suddenly opened his eyes. He maintained his posture of leaning against the tree trunk as he listened attentively to the movements outside. Yu Yin saw the carriages coming and hurriedly rode his horse to meet them. "Ride!" Seeing that it was the crown prince, the accompanying 100 soldiers and 50 guards all dismounted and saluted. Someone quickly ran to the carriage and said, "Master, His Highness the Crown Prince is here." Yu Yin shook the reins and rode to Qin Huayuan's carriage. He first saluted and said, "Grand Tutor Qin, His Highness the Crown Prince." Qin Huayuan jumped off the carriage and smiled to return the salute. He wanted to say something polite, but the Crown Prince interrupted him first. "Grand Tutor Qin, I have something to say to 4th Miss Qin. I hope you will allow me to delay the carriages for a while." Qin Huayuan was stunned and then looked at the carriage behind him. The door of the carriage was pushed open, and Qin Yining, who was wearing a white rabbit fur cloak, looked over in surprise. Yu Yan's eyes met with Qin Yining's, and his heartbeat suddenly went out of control. He jumped off the horse and couldn't help but walk quickly to her. "4th Miss, fortunately, I caught up with you. Don't worry, no matter what happens, as long as you come back, I will immediately ask for an imperial edict from my father. I swear, only you can be the crown princess." Qin Yining stared at Yu Yin in shock. Yu Yin looked at Qin Yining with burning eyes. The surroundings were silent, and everyone was stunned. In the forest, Pang Xiao, who was squatting on a tree, snorted with a gloomy face. Huzi was so scared that he hurriedly moved out and almost fell off the tree. Chapter 108. Qin Yining blinked her beautiful eyes. It took her a long time to digest the meaning of Yu Yan's words. She was a little moved, but more than that, she was surprised and pondered. She wasn't familiar with Yu Yin. His words made people think that they had already pledged their undying love to each other. If he really had such words, why did he say it in front of so many people? If he was afraid that she wouldn't be humiliated and would commit suicide, why didn't he tell her secretly and give her a chance to live? Now, the officials from the Ministry of Rights, the 100 soldiers and 50 guards arranged by the emperor were all watching. There must be spies from different factions among them. Yu Yin wanted to tie her to his ship in front of everyone and pull Qin Huaiyuan to his side. He didn't care about her reputation at all. He wanted everyone to misunderstand that she and the crown prince had secretly agreed to marry each other. Qin Yining had to admit that she was too realistic. But she was the legitimate daughter of the Grand Preceptor. She couldn't be like an ordinary girl who only talked about love and not analyzed the situation of the court. If Yu Yin was just a young master from an ordinary family, she would think that he was showing his true feelings. But Yu Yin was the crown prince. The crown prince's position was in danger. The crown prince had a close relationship with Ning Wang. When Ning Wang stole the Bing Tang, she went to rescue him and fell into his trap. She was forced to pull Ding General Manor and her father into Ning Wang's camp. That was why Ning Wang was able to successfully impeach Xiao Guozhang and offend the Chao family. That was why the Demon Empress set him up, causing Sun Yuanming's death and the Sun family's destruction. So many women had no one to rely on and indirectly caused her mother's difficulties in Qin Manor. This chain reaction was caused by Ning Wang and the Crown Prince's plan. At that time, she naively thought that she was saving people. But the cruel reality taught her a lesson. The Sun family's blood was expensive. With all these experiences, Qin Yining was no longer a young girl who was filled with longing for love. She smiled and supported the hands of Bing Tang and Song Lan as she slowly got off the carriage. She took 2 steps back and bowed. She said crisply, "Your Highness, please conduct yourself with dignity. Since ancient times, marriage has always been decided by the parents and matchmakers. Your Highness' conduct is not in accordance with etiquette." Yu Yin was stunned when he heard this. His fair face immediately flushed red. He took 2 quick steps towards Qin Yining and reached out to hold her hand. "Fourth young lady, you've misunderstood. Pa." His hand grabbed hers, but was immediately swatted away by her other hand, leaving a patch of red on the back of his hand. Qin Yining frowned and said coldly, "Your Highness, men and women should not touch each other." Although this subject's daughter was ordered to participate in the peace talks, and the outside world made all kinds of rumors about this subject's daughter was willing to sacrifice herself for the country. Today, Your Highness actually took advantage of this subject's daughter in front of so many people. This subject's daughter's reputation is not in your eyes. Yu Yin looked down at his hand in a daze. He then looked at the 100 or so people around them. He then looked at Qin Huaiyuan, who was frowning. A few simple brain circuits were finally connected. He thought about how Prince Ning persuaded his imperial father to release him from confinement last night. He thought about how Prince Ning urged him to quickly chase after her this morning. Some vague ideas gradually formed in his mind. He felt that he was being used, but he still didn't understand the specific details. He only knew that his confession didn't get Qin Yining's eyes filled with tears. He didn't get her to be moved and give her body to him. Instead, he had taken advantage of her in front of so many people and looked down on her. That's right. She wasn't a brothel girl. She was a proper lady from a noble family. Even if there were only 2 people talking about the matters between a man and a woman, it would still be private. Moreover, he had actually announced it in front of so many people and even wanted to grab her hand. Yu Yin was filled with regret. His face had already turned purple. "Tianhan, the crown prince is busy with official business. Please go back," Qin Yining said as he curtsied and got back into the carriage. The crown prince was stunned in place as he stared blankly at his beautiful back. Qin Huaiyuan watched everything from the side and naturally understood Qin Yining's considerations. He had a deeper understanding of his daughter's intelligence. In the past, when she schemed with people in the Fu, he could only see her intelligence and methods. Now, her actions truly showed her political acumen and her ability to see the big picture. She had rejected him so harshly not only to protect her reputation, but also to let people know that he, Qin Huaiyuan, was loyal to the emperor. Even if he became the crown prince's imperial tutor, He hadn't become someone else's weapon. Moreover, she was a lady of the boudoir. When faced with such a public molestation, her rebuke was righteous and justified. She also said that marriage was a matter of respect to one's parents. She also left some leeway for the marriage between the family Qin and the Crown Prince. Your Highness the Crown Prince, the auspicious hour cannot be delayed. This official will take his leave first. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and bowed to the Crown Prince. His attitude was no different from his usual humble and courteous manner. No one could tell what he was thinking. Yu Qiyin was so anxious that sweat appeared on his forehead. Imperial tutor, Your Highness the Crown Prince doesn't need to say anymore. This official understands. What do you understand? I'm just afraid that you understand wrongly. Yu Qiyin screamed in his heart. His lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. Pang Xiao, who was sitting on a tree in the forest, once again relaxed and leaned against the tree trunk. He closed his eyes and rested. Qin Huaiyuan and Yu Qiyin went through the formalities, then got into the carriage and gave the order to set off. The carriages moved slowly. Yu Qiyin stood on the side of the road with the eunuchs. After a long time, he came back to his senses and got on the horse in a daze. He was no longer in high spirits. The eunuch who was following him looked at the Crown Prince's face and tried to figure out, Your Highness, the young lady from the family Qin doesn't know how to appreciate favors. Your Highness the Crown Prince is such a romantic and elegant person. You are willing to marry a withered woman like her. How dare she be so arrogant? Your Highness, how about... Go away! Yu Qiyin lashed out with his whip and said angrily, Go to Prince Ning's mansion. The eunuch was shocked to realize that he had hit the horse's leg. He didn't dare to say anything more and hurriedly saluted. The group of people followed the Crown Prince to the city. The official road gradually returned to silence. Pang Xiao opened his eyes and landed on the ground with a light leap. Huzi followed closely behind. Master, that Crown Prince really likes the fourth miss of the Qin family. He likes her, but his actions are too disorderly. Pang Xiao walked to the depths of the forest in the direction where they tied the horses. Huzi was surprised that Pang Xiao had answered him. He hurriedly asked, Master, although Crown Prince didn't consider the fourth miss's reputation, and it's not good to do that in public, he also showed his true feelings. The person behind the scenes used his true feelings. He was betrayed and still sold for money. It's not bad to keep this kind of Crown Prince. Master, I don't understand. Didn't he say in the end that he was going to find Prince Ning? Pang Xiao had already walked to the horse and untied the reins. Crown Prince's confinement was only lifted last night. He stayed in the Eastern Palace for the whole new year to reflect on his mistakes. He was lifted yesterday and hurried here early this morning. After doing something stupid, he went back to find Prince Ning. Don't you understand? Huzi blinked his eyes and let out a long oh. It's Prince Ning behind the scenes again. He wants to win over Qin Ming completely. Oh, last time he tried to win over Qin Ming, all the men of the Sun family were killed. This time, tut. Fortunately, the fourth miss knew how to respect herself and avoided this disaster. Pang Xiao stroked his beloved horse with shiny black fur and said, She's a smart one. It was a waste of his sweat for her just now. Huzi was surprised and said, Master, do you mean that the fourth miss did it on purpose? Let's go. Hey, Master, you haven't answered me yet. Pang Xiao didn't say anything. Huzi sullenly pursed his lips and followed Pang Xiao to lead the horse to the official road. He muttered, It's just the two of us. Even if the Taitan people come, what can we do? Besides, there are more than 150 men in the peace negotiation team. At most, 20 or 30 Taitan people will come. They won't be able to destroy the peace negotiation team. Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows and looked at Huzi. Then he pulled out a black leather rope from his collar. A small red jade whistle carved with a tiger's head was tied to the rope. Huzi was surprised and said, You called for Jinghu Wei? Pang Xiao answered with the whistle. A bleak, high-pitched eagle's cry spread through the sky. Not long after, 10 strong men rode their horses from the direction of the capital. They were all in their early 20s and were all tall and strong. Their chi acupoints were bulging, and one could tell at a glance that their skills were not ordinary. Seeing Pang Xiao sitting gracefully on the black horse, the 10 men dismounted and knelt on one knee. They saluted in unison. "Master, well, get up. It's been a long journey. Follow me. It's our honor to be loyal to our master. It's not hard at all." The 10 men mounted their horses again and followed behind Pang Xiao. Huzi clicked his tongue. The Jinghui were carefully trained by Pang Xiao. They were all people who had no home to return to during the war. On the surface, they were counted as soldiers of the Prince Zhongshuan's government. There were only 100 of them. However, these 100 people were the cream of the crop from the thousands of people who had gathered here. Those who were not selected were all incorporated into the Tiger Army. It could be said that most of the men in the Tiger Army who worshipped Wang Yi were trained by Wang Yi. Everyone wanted to be like the Jinghui and serve Wang Yi closely. Before Wang Yi left for the war, he left 40 Jinghui behind to protect the prince's mansion. 20 Jinghui were hidden and assigned missions around the capital. He also left 6 disguised as servants and eunuchs to protect the old madam and the others. He only brought 34 people with him. These 34 people all had their own missions. Now that he heard that the Taitan spies had infiltrated Dezhou, Wang Yi sent 10 of them to protect the daughter of his enemy. Huzi didn't know what to say. Pang Xiao and Huzi led the 10 Jinghui and followed behind the group of people who were negotiating in Dezhou at a distance. They could prevent the group from discovering them and ensure the safety of the group. Later that evening, the Tatars, who were disguised as mountain bandits, were completely wiped out by Pang Xiao and his men without the slightest effort. For Qin Yining, the journey was quite peaceful. For Pang Xiao and Huzi, the journey was relaxing and not boring. On the afternoon of the 18th, the group finally arrived at the outskirts of Xihua City. Qin Yining lifted the warm curtains on the window. The fiery red setting sun half covered the mountains. The ancient city of Xihua City stood tall and looked at the swaying mountains and rivers in the Dian with a pitiful gaze. The two armies stood in the wilderness. The wind that blew was mixed with the smell of gunpowder and blood. This was a cruel battlefield. Chapter 109. As soon as the Dian peace talk team arrived, they were welcomed into the city by General Wang Hui and Magistrate Liu, who had been waiting for a long time. Seeing that there was a beautiful young lady accompanying him, how could the crowd not understand? The faces of the hot-blooded men who had fought on the battlefield blushed. They were not like the group of cowards who only knew how to talk on paper and were afraid of death in the capital. They had fought on the front line and seen the cruelty of war with their own eyes. They understood the role played by the old, the weak, the women, and the children in the war. They risked their lives to prevent the enemy from harming the women and children in their families. They wanted the people to have food to eat and clothes to wear. They wanted the children to have books to study and grow up safely. Therefore, any hot-blooded man would not want to see rape, and pillage happen in front of their eyes. If they fought to the death, it was because their martial arts were not good enough. They could not care about what happened after they died. However, before they fought to the death, the emperor sent an innocent girl to their door. Wasn't this a slap in the face? The emperor of Dezhou bullied the Dian in every possible way. However, the emperor listened to the evil empress' slanderous words. Not only did he harm the loyal people, but he also ignored the people's wishes. The blood of the loyal soldiers of Ding General Manor was not cold yet. The soldiers were ready to fight with all their strength. However, the emperor was so afraid of death. Dezhou casually said a word of peace talk, and the emperor did not care about the former enmity. He even took the initiative to send Grand Preceptor Qin's daughter to the Dian. Everyone had a lot of resentment in their hearts. They hated the incapable emperor and the evil empress. They felt pain for the Ding General Manor, which had been destroyed. They sympathized with Grand Preceptor Qin, who they had always respected. They also felt pity for Grand Preceptor Qin's daughter. Therefore, General Wang Hui, Magistrate Liu, and the others were very polite to Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Yining. Grand Preceptor Qin, Miss Qin, please settle down in the magistrate's office today. Qin Huayuan said, "There's no hurry to settle down. I'm afraid that a long delay may lead to unexpected changes. It's better to send a letter to the enemy camp now. It's better to decide the location and time of the peace talk first." Magistrate Lu nodded and said, "Yes, the Grand Preceptor is right." Qin Huayuan turned around and said to Qin Yining, "Go and have a good rest. If anything happens, I'll send someone to pick you up." "Yes, father." Qin Yining bowed to everyone and left. The prefectural magistrate's wife was standing guard outside the door with her maidservants. When she saw Qin Yining come out, she immediately politely led her into the yamen and arranged for her to stay in the best room in the main courtyard. She also ordered the maidservants to prepare good food and hot water for her. That night, Qin Yining tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. No matter how strong she appeared to be, she was still a girl who had yet to reach marriageable age. When she thought of what she was about to experience, she was so nervous that her whole body turned cold. She had always said that she was open-minded and that nothing was more important than surviving. But now that things had really happened, she suddenly began to doubt whether she could continue to live if she was really humiliated. What was the point of living? She was lost in thought as she looked at the light on the curtain. It was not until the sky turned bright that Qin Yining fell asleep in a daze. It seemed that she had just fallen asleep when a servant's voice came from outside. "Grand Preceptor Qin has sent someone to invite Miss Qin." Qin Yining sat up with a start and opened the curtain. What she saw was a pale Song Lan and a red-eyed Bing Tang. "I know. Go and tell my father that I'll be there in a moment." Qin Yining's voice was a bit hoarse. Qin Yining rubbed her slightly painful temples and said to Bing Tang and Song Lan, "Help me dress up." "Yes." Song Lan choked with sobs. She took out a beautiful jade-colored robe and a jade-colored brocade cloak with a white fox fur collar and helped Qin Yining change into it. Bing Tang opened the dressing room and helped Qin Yining put on her makeup. Her hair was piled into a jade bun, her eyebrows were lightly swept, her eyes were limpid, and her lips were dainty. Qin Yining looked at herself in the bronze mirror. She was different from her usual bare-faced self. Today, she was much brighter than usual. She tried to smile. She smiled, but Bing Tang and Song Lan beside her were crying. "Miss Yu, don't cry. I'm not going to die." Qin Yining stood up and stroked her long hair that fell on her shoulders. She smiled and said, "You don't have to come with me. Wait for me here." "Miss, I'll go with you." Bing Tang sniffed and said, "At least I know how to use poison. If that old bastard really wants to harm you, I'll poison him to death. If he dies, the peace talks will fail. The next to die will be the entire Qin residence." Qin Yining smiled bitterly and took out a handkerchief to wipe Bing Tang's tears. "Don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'll come back alive. It's inconvenient for you to come with me. Just wait for me here." Song Lan choked with sobs and knelt down with a plop. She grabbed the corner of Qin Yining's jade-colored cloak and said, "Miss, this servant's life was saved by you. If you're not here, this servant will follow you and continue to serve you in the afterlife." "Me too. If you're not here, I'll go back and perish with the Demon Empress. I'll continue to serve you in the afterlife." Bing Tang also knelt down and grabbed Qin Yining's hand. "Silly words." Qin Yining pulled the two up and patted Song Lan's shoulder. Then he pinched Bing Tang's apple face. "You're both still young. What's more, if I'm really not here anymore, won't you think of helping me take care of my mother?" "Miss!" Song Lan cried even harder. Qin Yining blinked and forced back the tears that were about to gush out, leaving them with the brightest smile. "Okay, I'm leaving." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left without hesitation. Bing Tang and Song Lan chased after him while sobbing. However, they could only stand in the corridor and watch Qin Yining leave with the prefectural magistrate's madam. Qin Huayuan didn't sleep for the entire night. At this moment, he was standing in the corridor wearing a sable fur coat. He looked up at the blue sky and was lost in thought. General Wang Hui was already outside, making preparations for the trip. Magistrate Lu was standing beside him. "Father," a clear call made Qin Huayuan come back to his senses. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw Qin Yining, who was elegantly dressed but so beautiful that he couldn't take his eyes off her. "Father, are we going now?" Qin Yining smiled. Qin Huayuan's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and nodded. Whether the location of the peace talks is in or outside the city, it's not reassuring. Therefore, after discussion last night, we decided to set up temporary tents between the two armies outside Xihua City. Both sides are allowed to bring 100 soldiers with them. Sister Yi, you'll come with me later. Qin Yining nodded obediently. The pearl tassels on her temples swayed slightly. It's good that we're not in the city. We don't want people from Dezhou to sneak in and harm us. When we go out, we have to close the city gates and leave someone to guard it. You're right. I've already discussed it with Magistrate Liu and General Wang Hui. I'll lead the officials from the Ministry of Rights to preside over the peace talks. General Wang Hui and Magistrate Liu will stay behind to guard the city. That's good. We can rest assured. Not long after, General Wang Hui had already selected 100 men from the army. Qin Huayuan and the Minister of Rights, Cui Wenqing, walked in front, while Qin Yining followed behind alone. They left the yamen together. Before leaving the city gates, Qin Huayuan led Qin Yining up the city gate tower. General Wang Hui, Magistrate Liu, and the 100 soldiers followed closely behind. Standing on the towering city gate tower, Qin Yining's long hair fluttered in the wind as a gust of wild wind blew past. She looked at the beautiful mountains and rivers under the morning sun. She looked at Dezhou's barracks, which were not far away. She looked at the pale and continuous mountain ranges in the distance. She suddenly felt that the sky was vast and the ground was vast. Qin Huayuan stood with his hands behind his back and asked loudly, "Sister Yi, are you afraid? What's there to be afraid of? When people come to this world, no one can leave alive. The worst that can happen is death. What's there to be afraid of?" Her voice was not loud, but everyone present heard her clearly. The 100 soldiers who were originally selected were all determined to die. Even the Minister of Rights, Cui Wenqing, was so nervous that his back was covered in cold sweat. If the peace talks failed and Dezhou turned hostile, none of them would be able to survive. But now, these men were filled with hot blood. They were suddenly emboldened and filled with lofty sentiments. What was there to be afraid of? Even a little girl like her had such a heart. There was no reason for these men to be afraid of death. General Wang Hui was moved and said, "Miss Qin is indeed the daughter of a famous family. I admire you. Don't worry, Grand Preceptor Qin. If the peace talks fail, we will kill these thieves who dare to bully Dian, even if we have to risk our lives." Good. With General Wang and Magistrate Liu guarding the city, we have nothing to worry about. Qin Huayuan smiled calmly. Then, he said loudly, "Prepare the carriages and horses. Let's set out." "Yes." The men responded loudly. Their voices shook the heavens. Qin Huayuan and Cui Wenqing boarded the first carriage. Qin Yining sat alone in the second carriage. They were escorted by 100 soldiers to the temporary camp that had just been set up between the two armies. Because both sides had brought the same number of soldiers and had set up their own tents and the main tent used for peace talks, the camp occupied a large area. As soon as Qin Yining's carriage entered the camp, he saw two groups of people wearing red clothes and black armor and khaki military uniforms had already occupied half of the camp in an orderly manner. The people in red clothes and black armor had a tiger head emblem on their sleeves. Behind these people, there were several flags with a golden tiger on a black background and a flag with the word swastika on a red background fluttering in the wind. The men in Dezhou's khaki military uniforms had the word Lian fluttering behind them. Qin Yining immediately knew that the people in red clothes and black armor were Prince Zhongshuan and Pang Zhao's tiger army. The people in khaki military uniforms were ordinary soldiers of Dezhou. They should be under the command of the Minister of War, Lian Xingjie. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Qin Huayuan and Cui Wenqing got off the carriage one after the other. Qin Yining stepped on a black wooden stool and slowly got off the carriage. As soon as he raised his head, he saw a group of people walking out of the opposite tent. The leader was a general in his 50s. He had a well-built body, but his eyes were drooping and his face was greasy. He wore golden armor. When this person saw Qin Yining, his eyes widened and he stopped in his tracks. He wished he could dig out his eyeballs and hang them on Qin Yining's body. Such a lecherous person must be the Minister of War, Lian Xingjie, of Dezhou. Qin Yining felt disgusted, but he pretended not to notice. His beautiful eyes turned and landed on an immortal-looking man in his 60s. He was wearing a light gray cotton cloak. His beard fluttered in the wind. Who was this? He looked like a strategist. Chapter 110. Qin Huaiyuan stepped forward and shielded Qin Yining behind him. Then, he looked at the old man staring at him in confusion. He didn't recognize this person, so he didn't understand why the other party was looking at him with such a gaze full of anger and resentment. Zheng Pei took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He smiled kindly and said, "Sir, you must be the famous wise Panin, Grand Preceptor Qin?" Qin Huaiyuan cupped his hands in greeting. "That's just some people's false praise. May I ask who this gentleman is?" "This humble one is a strategist under Prince Zhongshuan's command. My surname is Zheng." Upon hearing Prince Zhongshuan's name, Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Yining immediately understood why this person was so hostile. After all, Qin Huaiyuan was the one who tried to drive a wedge between them. Judging from this Sir Zheng's age, he might have once followed Pang Zhongxing. "So it's Sir Zheng. My apologies for not recognizing you." Qin Huaiyuan looked around and said with a smile, "Sir, you must be the Minister of War, Sir Lian, right? Is little Wang Yi also present?" Lian Xingjie had already stretched his neck and looked at Qin Yining several times. When he heard Qin Huaiyuan mention himself, he felt a burst of pride. However, when he was asked about Pang Xiao, he felt unhappy. He immediately said with a sullen expression, "I'm now in charge of the army. I'm here to preside over the peace talks according to the imperial decree. Little Wang Yi is only a General Huban. What difference does it make whether he's here or not?" Qin Huaiyuan raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "That's true." Zheng Pei had already sized up Qin Yining. In his mind, he was cursing him for being a seductress who could bring disaster to the country and its people. He smiled and asked, "Dare I ask which official of your country this young lady is?" These words made the Dayan's face heat up. Everyone knew that there were no female officials in Dayan. Lian Xingjie's lecherous nature was no secret. The goal of bringing a stunning beauty along with the Dayan peace talks team was very obvious. Zheng Pei's question was akin to trampling on Dayan's dignity. Qin Yining no longer had a good impression of Mr. Zheng. Qin Huaiyuan was still smiling as he said, "This is my legitimate daughter. I don't have a son. I only have this one bright pearl. In the future, I have the heart to entrust her with important tasks, so I like to bring her along wherever I go to let her broaden her horizons and broaden her horizons." The Dayan people heaved a sigh of relief. They felt that they had once again regained their dignity and praised Qin Huaiyuan's wit in their hearts. The people from Dezhou were secretly disdainful. How shameless of him to find such a dignified reason to present a beauty. "So it's the daughter of Grand Preceptor Qin. I apologize for my lack of manners." Zheng Pei was still smiling, but his eyes were full of ridicule. If she was an ordinary lady, under the Lian Xingjie's impudent gaze and Zheng Pei's mocking smile, she would have been so embarrassed that she wished she could find a hole to hide in. However, Qin Yining just stood calmly behind Qin Huaiyuan, as if he was a legitimate son following his father out to broaden his horizons. "Since that's the case, let's talk in the tent." The Dayan Minister of Rites, Cui Wenqing, smiled and said, "I've already ordered people to prepare dishes to go with the wine. Let's talk while we eat." "Please, please." The key members of the peace talks team entered the main tent. Qin Yining naturally followed Qin Huaiyuan. The tent was a pure white military canopy. A bonfire was burning in the middle of the ground, and an iron pot was boiling water on top of it. The ground was covered with a bright red carpet. Further inside, There were 3 long tables placed on both sides of the tent. Lian Xingjie, a deputy general, and Zheng Pei sat on the left. Qin Huayuan and Cui Wenqing sat on the right. Qin Yining, on the other hand, took a seat behind her father. Lian Xingjie and Qin Huayuan sat facing each other. As soon as he looked up, he could see Qin Yining's beautiful face. His heart was already surging with emotions, and his lust was greatly aroused. Although he was the official in charge of the peace talks, his mind was completely focused on the beautiful woman. He didn't even pay attention to what was discussed. Fortunately, Great Zhou still had Zheng Pei, a steady and sharp man, who was able to engage in a battle of words with Qin Huayuan and Cui Wenqing, openly praising and insinuating and bargaining with them. That was why they did not fall into a disadvantageous position and did not let Great Yin gain the upper hand in the battle of words. This negotiation lasted for 8 hours. However, there were many things such as paying tribute and ceding territory that didn't reach a consensus. De Zhou's people demanded an exorbitant price. They wanted to maximize their benefits. Qin Huayuan, on the other hand, stubbornly refused to relent and tried his best to minimize the losses. When the lanterns were lit, the soldiers in the tent lit the lanterns. Everyone's mouths were dry from all the talking. Even the wine and dishes were hot and cold. They went back and forth a few times. Lian Xingjie had been looking at the beautiful woman for the entire afternoon. His mind was already churning with countless tricks. When he heard that Qin Huayuan didn't agree to pay 50 million taels of silver as compensation, he frowned and pretended to think. 50 million taels of silver as compensation for the losses of De Zhou's soldiers is really not much. However, it's not like we can't discuss it. When Zheng Pei saw this, he was just about to open his mouth when Lian Xingjie said with a sullen expression, "Mr. Zheng has been busy the entire afternoon. Shouldn't you let this official say a few words?" Zheng Pei was Pang Zhao's aide. In the Tiger Army, he had the title of military advisor. However, he didn't have any actual official rank or military rank. The only reason he was able to sit here today was because of Pang Zhao's promotion. Pang Zhao wasn't in the barracks, so the Tiger Army had to send out a representative. Lian Xingjie didn't dare to do anything to him. However, when Lian Xingjie displayed his authority, there was nothing Zheng Pei could do. Seeing that Zheng Pei wasn't saying anything, Lian Xingjie stood up and pretended to stretch his arms. He strolled around the tent twice before finally walking over to Qin Huayuan's side. He leaned over to look at Qin Yining's fair face. His eyes were full of desire, but his words were directed at Qin Huayuan. Of course, peace talk. Peace talk means that we should discuss it together. This official loves to drink wine. I've heard that Grand Preceptor Qin has raised his legitimate daughter as if she were his legitimate son. I'm sure that Miss Gongzi's alcohol tolerance isn't bad. If Miss Gongzi is willing to drink a few cups with this official, then the conditions can still be discussed. It's finally here. Qin Yining closed his eyes. Qin Huayuan's hands gradually clenched into fists. Although he was smiling, his heart was struggling between anger and helplessness. Qin Yining didn't want to make things difficult for Qin Huayuan, so he stood up and curtsied. Lord Lian is a peerless hero with a forthright personality. This humble girl admires you greatly. Thus, this humble girl will take this opportunity to propose a toast to Lord Lian. As she spoke, she picked up the wine jar and poured a large bowl full of wine for Lian Xingjie. Then, she picked up a small, white porcelain wine cup for herself. Lian Xingjie took the white porcelain wine bowl from the beauty. His eyes were filled with her snow-white skin, and his mind was filled with those charming thoughts. How could he possibly react to what he was drinking? His eyes were fixed on Qin Yining as he drank the bowl in one gulp. He felt a burning sensation in his stomach. Only then did he realize that he had been forced to drink a large bowl of xiaodao. Lian Xingjie was a bit tipsy, but he didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled. "AI, a beauty's grace is the hardest to bear. The wine she pours tastes exceptionally good." "Is that so? Then Lord Lian should eat another bowl. As the saying goes, 3 bowls won't cross the line. With Lord Lian's bravery, you should eat 3 bowls." As she spoke, She poured another bowl and looked at Lien Xingjie with sparkling eyes. Lien Xingjie was already feeling the effects of the wine. Although he wasn't dizzy and disoriented, the wine had boosted his courage. In his most excited moment, he didn't care if there were others around him. His large hand grabbed Qin Yining's soft and delicate hand and pulled her into his embrace. "Beautiful girl, are you trying to get me drunk?" "Let me tell you, old Lien, am most afraid of a beautiful girl's gentleness. If you're willing to serve me well, then why can't we talk about peace? I'll loosen up a bit here. Your Majesty is far away from my country, so you have to listen to my repayment. Beautiful girl, you're a very perceptive person. I can also see that, if we have a short-lived marriage, then we won't let down this heaven-bestowed fate. Don't you think so?" Qin Yining's entire body stiffened and her face turned purple. Her round, almond-shaped eyes were filled with humiliation and anger. But more than that, there was nothing she could do. Wasn't this the purpose of her visit today? A short-lived marriage? Shouldn't she be glad that the heavens didn't arrange for this official Lien to take her away? Veins popped out on Qin Huaiyuan's forehead. He couldn't bear it any longer and stood up to block Qin Yining behind him. "Official Lien, I only brought my daughter here to see more and gain more knowledge. Let's talk about serious matters first." Qin Yining looked at Qin Huaiyuan's tall back with tears in her eyes. Her father was still protecting her in the end. Although he couldn't disobey the emperor's orders and had no choice but to bring her here, it was still her father who protected her at critical moments. However, could she let her father protect her with a clear conscience? What if the peace talks failed and the emperor blamed her? Lien Xingjie's face immediately darkened. His voice was extremely loud due to the effects of the wine. "What? You know that this old Lien is fond of women. Didn't you bring such a great beauty here so that I could enjoy her? Now that I'm giving you face. Now that you're regretting it, why didn't you do it earlier? 50 million taels of silver and 15 cities. Not one less. Just now, he only wanted 5 cities, but now he was raising the price on the spot." Qin Yining bit her lip. She didn't want Qin Huaiyuan to spoil the important matter for her. As long as her father protected her in his heart, she was already satisfied. Qin Huaiyuan was also in a dilemma. For a moment, his face turned green and then white. Lien Xingjie smiled proudly and pushed Qin Huaiyuan aside. He grabbed Qin Yining's hand again and was about to lead her out. He was certain that Qin Huaiyuan wouldn't dare to stop him. Who would have thought that at this moment, the curtain of a tent would suddenly be pulled open with a whoosh sound. A tall silhouette carrying a bright and shining broadsword walked in aggressively. This person had broad shoulders, muscular arms, and a thin waist. He was dressed in a black battle robe that made his face look like jade. However, under his slender, sword-like eyebrows, a storm was brewing in his upturned phoenix eyes. Qin Huaiyuan turned his head and was stunned when he saw this person. Qin Yining was even more surprised. Yao Zhishi, she thought quickly and assumed that this person was here to save her. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart, and she almost cried. She frantically tried to persuade him, "Hurry up and leave. This isn't a place for you." However, Pang Xiao didn't care. He swung his arm, and without another word, chopped down with his broadsword. The broadsword went straight for Lien Xingjie's face. If it hit, Lien Xingjie's head would split open. Zheng Pei, who was standing to the side, shouted in fright, "Little Wang Yi, don't." Qin Yining was stunned. Then he stared at Pang Xiao with wide eyes. Lien Xingjie was so frightened that he sobered up. "Oh my God!" He took 2 steps back and fell to the ground, narrowly avoiding the broadsword. He was so flustered that he broke out in cold sweat. He pointed a trembling finger at Pang Xiao and shouted, "Pang Zhishi, what are you doing?" Chapter 111. When Lien Xingjie saw that Pang Xiao was about to attack him again, he screamed in fear and quickly rolled on the ground, narrowly avoiding the knife again. It was unknown whether Pang Xiao's knife was intentional or not, but it cut into the long, narrow table. More than half of the knife went in, but the long, narrow table was intact. He tried to pull it out, but it didn't come out. He simply grabbed Lian Xingjia's collar with his bare hands and punched him. Lian Xingjie screamed in pain. He covered his bruised eye with one hand and grabbed Pang Zhao's wrist with the other. He shouted, "Pang Zhishi, how dare you hit an official of the imperial court? I will definitely impeach you. Impeach you? If you're a man, then fight back. You only know how to complain." He punched him in the stomach again. "I won't give you the chance to impeach me." Lian Xingjie clutched his stomach and tried to resist, but he was suppressed again. "I will definitely impeach you. I will make you lose your official position. As you wish." Pang Xiao pressed Lian Xingjie to the ground and punched him. Everyone finally recovered from Pang Zhao's words of "my woman." Zheng Pei rushed forward in a panic and pulled Pang Zhao's arm. She said anxiously, "Little Wang Yiyu, you're too impulsive. He's the commander-in-chief after all." Pang Xiao kicked him again. "That's exactly what I'm going to beat up." Qin Yining stared blankly at Pang Xiao. His mind was already in a mess. No wonder this person's courtesy name was Zhishi. It turned out that he was Pang Zhishi. She always felt that this person wasn't simple. Sure enough, he was the little Wang Yi who made people tremble in fear and killed people without hesitation. Why did he go to the capital of the Dian? What was his relationship with Fairy Lu? She remembered that the emperor was still eating the elixirs that Fairy Lu had given him. Pang Zhao's father died because of a plot to drive a wedge between them. He should hate family Qin to the bone, but why did he help her save her time and time again? If he had ulterior motives, why didn't she feel any hostility from him? Pang Xiao turned around and flicked his finger. He raised his eyebrows and smiled at Qin Yining. His eyes seemed to be saying, "How was it? Did I enjoy beating him up?" Qin Yining blushed, but he didn't know how to react. Pang Zhao's attitude towards her seemed to be the same as before, but she didn't know how to face him. Lian Xingjie covered his bruised right eye and struggled to get up. Zheng Pei hurriedly supported him, but Lian Xingjie pushed him away. "Pang Zhishi, you have an affair with the daughter of the Grand Preceptor of the Yin dynasty. You clearly intend to commit treason. Which eye of yours saw this king having an affair with anyone? You clearly said that just now. This king fell in love at first sight. You're twisting words and forcing logic. This king beat you up, but this king took a liking to Miss Qin. If you can produce evidence of this king's treason to gain your majesty's trust, then do as you please. However, you have to try and see if you can survive." Pang Xiao spat out these words and turned to leave. Before he left the tent, he stopped and turned around to look at Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Yining. Qin Huaiyuan's eyes were calm as he looked back at Pang Xiao with an unreadable expression. Pang Xiao didn't look at him. He only gave Qin Yining a crooked smile before he lifted the curtain and walked out in high spirits. Qin Yining's heart pounded at his smile, and he couldn't help but hide behind Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan frowned as he looked at Lian Xingjie's bruised nose and swollen face. Zheng Pei let out a long sigh. He glared at Qin Huaiyuan and then at Qin Yining. He stomped his feet and said, "You're really a disaster. Disaster." Then he flicked his sleeves and left. The tent, which had been noisy just now quieted down. The only sound that could be heard was Lian Xingjie's pain cries. The contents of the peace talks had yet to be decided, but Lian Xingjie was beaten black and blue. Qin Huaiyuan and Cui Wenqing didn't know what to do. Lian Xingjie crawled up and walked out with the help of his deputy. Cui Wenqing chased after him and said, "Lord Lian, our peace talks, what's there to talk about? Can't you see that my lord is seriously injured? You have no sincerity at all, yet you still have the nerve to ask." The deputy reprimanded, then carefully helped Lian Xingjie away. Cui Wenqing turned around and said anxiously, "Grand Preceptor Qin, what should we do? Don't be impatient. Things like peace talks can't be concluded in a day. There has to be a period of time for discussion. Let's stay here for the time being and observe the situation. It won't be too late to discuss it tomorrow." Seeing Qin Huaiyuan so calm, Cui Wenqing also felt reassured. Thinking about the farce just now, she couldn't help but curse in a low voice. The people of Dezhou are really crafty. I heard that Pang Zhishi lost his position as marshal because he was unruly and unruly. The Emperor of Zhou arranged for Lian Xingjie to take his place. Pang Zhishi has been suppressing his anger for a long time and even left a few days ago. Today, he used our presence as an excuse to take revenge on Lian Xingjie. Yet he shamelessly implicated Miss Qin and tarnished her reputation. He really is abominable. Qin Huaiyuan sighed and said, "What can we do when we're under inferior eaves? Lord Shui, why don't we settle down for today? We'll see how things go tomorrow." Lord Shui is right. Let's settle down for today. Qin Huaiyuan, Chui Wenqing, and Qin Yining left the main tent and headed to their own territory on the east side of the camp. After bidding farewell to Chui Wenqing, Qin Huaiyuan and Qin Yining entered the tent and arranged for people to stand guard one zhang away from the tent. "Father, I didn't expect him to be Pang Zhishi. I didn't know about it before." Qin Yining lowered his voice and sounded anxious. Qin Huaiyuan waved his hand and interrupted Qin Yining's explanation. He smiled and said, "I know, it's not your fault. But he was the one who messed up today's matter." "Sister Yi." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and patted her head. "Actually, I'm not angry at him for barging in and messing up the situation. In fact, I'm very grateful to him." When Qin Yining heard this, tears welled up in her eyes. She thought back to how Lian Xingjie flirted with her as if no one else was present. He actually treated her as a fangirl for his amusement. Furthermore, he did it in front of her father and other strange men. If she was truly a chaste woman raised in a boudoir, she would have hanged herself long ago to prove her innocence. However, at this critical juncture, her father still did his best to protect her. "Father, I'm very touched that you're willing to protect me. However, we can't disobey the Emperor's orders. Today's peace talks didn't succeed, so we have to report this to the Emperor. If the Emperor really blames you, you won't be able to explain yourself if he says that you don't care about the country and can't even bear to part with your daughter and disregard the country's safety. Next time, if that Lian Xingjie does this again, you should give up on your daughter." Qin Huaiyuan knew that Qin Yining was right. However, his only daughter looked so much like him when he was young. Her temperament and personality were so lovable. How could Qin Huaiyuan bear to part with her? "Father will definitely think of another way. Sister Yi, don't worry." Qin Yining suddenly raised her head and looked at Qin Huaiyuan with teary eyes. Being stared at by her sparkling eyes, Qin Huaiyuan's heart almost melted into a puddle of water. His large hand gently patted her forehead again. "Father's greatest regret in this life is that you didn't grow up by my side. We've only met for a short time, but we've spent more time apart than together." Qin Yining's smile was so big that she squeezed out the tears in her eyes. Qin Huaiyuan used his sleeve to wipe her face. "Silly girl, what are you crying for? If you grew up by father's side and received father's meticulous training, you would definitely be more outstanding than ordinary men. We have no choice but to obey the Emperor's orders. The Emperor ordered father to bring you along, so father brought you along. However, if the people of Dezhou don't want to, we can't forcefully send them over, right? How can the Emperor blame us?" Qin Yining's eyes widened. She quickly understood Qin Huaiyuan's meaning. "Father, are you saying that Pang Zhishi caused a ruckus today because of this? He beat up that person surnamed Lian until he was seriously injured, and that person surnamed Lian couldn't do it himself, so he doesn't blame you or me. I'm afraid that's what Pang Zhishi meant." Qin Huaiyuan narrowed his eyes. His gaze was deep and serene as he said, "I can't see through him. When I first met him, I felt that he was unfathomable. Now it seems that he has an extraordinary background. His actions are unreasonable, but he has his reasons. It's said that on the battlefield, he's full of tricks and tricks. He often does unexpected things, making it impossible for people to guard against him. In their imperial court, he doesn't follow the rules. Some people say that he's an upright man who can't be subdued by force, while others say that he's a devil incarnate who dares to make a scene in court. In any case, there are all kinds of rumors about him. Even the Emperor of Dezhou can't do anything to him. This is the first time I've met him, and I really can't figure out what he's trying to do." After listening to his father's description, Qin Yining thought about how Pang Xiao never stopped teasing her when they were together. However, she couldn't really hate him, and she gained a deeper understanding of this person's unfathomable depths. "Forget it. You're tired today. Go back and settle down. There are men everywhere in this military camp, so you have to be careful. Yes, your daughter will take her leave." Qin Yining bowed and left. A Yin soldier led the way to his tent. Because the entire military camp was filled with men, it was inconvenient for them to live together. Qin Yining's tent was built on the north side of the Dayan camp, with a wooden fence separating them. There was a large tent in the middle of the wooden fence, and it seemed to be isolated from the rest of the world. 2 soldiers were left to stand guard on this side of the fence. When Qin Yining returned to his tent, he didn't light the lamp. He first washed and changed his clothes. Then, he stuffed a dagger that he had hidden on his body when he left Xihua City under his pillow and went to sleep with his clothes on. In the next few days, the peace talks entered a state of anxiety. After Lian Xingjie was beaten up by Pang Xiao, he claimed that he was sick and couldn't get up. Because Lian Xingjie was the official in charge of the peace talks in Dezhou, if he didn't appear to sign or use his seal, then it was useless for others to say anything. For the first 2 days, the Dayan people were still able to keep their cool. On the 3rd day, imperial edicts continuously came from the capital. Xihua City wasn't far from the capital. The emperor's imperial edicts came one after another. Basically, every 2 hours, Qin Huayuan would receive an imperial edict that angrily rebuked Qin Huayuan for his incompetence. The contents of the imperial edicts were the same. They scolded Qin Huayuan for being incompetent. He had brought his daughter, but he wasn't willing to hand her over. If he was willing to hand over his daughter, the peace talks would have been successful a long time ago. Could it be that Qin Huayuan wasn't willing to hand over his daughter and was disloyal to Dayan? Although Qin Yining lived alone, she couldn't help but worry about her father when she heard the eunuchs outside delivering edicts every 2 hours and reprimanding Qin Huayuan to the point that he was beaten black and blue. It seemed that the emperor was really anxious and scared. Otherwise, he wouldn't have disregarded manpower and material resources. He was so anxious that he didn't even care about his face. It had been 7 days since they arrived at the peace talks camp. Lian Xingjie still closed his door and claimed to be ill. He refused to sign or use his seal. And tonight, Qin Huayuan received an unprecedented amount of rebuke. The emperor even cursed Qin Huayuan in the imperial edict as a wretched man, a lowly slave. Qin Yining understood what Lian Xingjie was doing. It was nothing more than waiting for them to take the initiative to hand over their daughter. That way, he could regain the face he had lost that day. In the past few days, his father indeed hadn't taken the initiative to hand her over. How could she continue to hide under her father's protection? Would she really not cause his death? Qin Yining thought to this point. He suddenly sat up and looked at the sky outside. The sky was already dark. It was past noon. She gritted her teeth and made up her mind. She hid the dagger under her pillow in her sleeve pocket. She straightened her hair and put on the jade cloak with the white fox fur collar. She went out the door and headed straight for the Dezhou people's tent across the open space. Chapter 112. The banners fluttered loudly in the night wind. On the Tiger Army's flag, the ferocious tiger head with golden embroidery revealed its sharp fangs under the illumination of the torches. Qin Yining wrapped her cloak tightly around herself, her long hair fluttering behind her head. She passed through the empty square and headed straight for the luxurious tent in the middle of the opposite camp. She had investigated beforehand and found out that the Lian Xingjie was the commander-in-chief and had the highest status in the army. Therefore, he lived in the most luxurious tent. Not only did he hate work and was greedy for pleasure, but he also wanted a beautiful woman to accompany him every night. At this time, most of the ordinary soldiers were already asleep. Only the soldiers on patrol and sentry duty were still on duty. Therefore, the luxurious tent in the middle of the camp was the only place with a light. The Tiger Army on sentry duty had already noticed Qin Yining's figure. She was wearing a jade-colored cloak that shimmered faintly under the night sky. It made her fair face look as flawless as jade. All the rats in the army were male. Since there was a woman, and such a beautiful woman at that, they naturally feasted their eyes on her. Therefore, the soldiers on sentry duty didn't stop Qin Yining when they saw her. They only cared about admiring her beauty. Qin Yining felt several gazes on her. She felt as if there were needles all over her body, and the hair on her back stood on end. However, she couldn't shrink back. She couldn't be afraid. She couldn't let her father lose his life in order to protect her. While she was thinking, she was already standing outside the tent. Through the bright light, she could see the shadows of the furnishings in the tent. The two Tiger Army soldiers on sentry duty looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they were hesitant. Such a delicate beauty, standing outside the tent in the middle of the night. It was obvious that she was throwing herself at them. Should they not stop her? Or should they not stop her? Or should they not stop her? The two soldiers exchanged a knowing look and didn't say anything. Qin Yining's face turned red. She pursed her red lips and said, "This little girl from the Qin clan requests an audience with Sir." The tent was completely silent. Just as Qin Yining was sweating nervously and awkwardly, she heard a voice say, "Come in." Qin Yining tightened his grip on the dagger in his sleeve and calmed himself down. Then, he slowly stepped forward and lifted the curtain to enter. The two Tiger Army soldiers standing guard looked at each other again and smiled tacitly. For silk lamps were burning in the tent. On the left side of the tent, there was a long table with books, maps, and other things neatly arranged on it. Behind the table was a chair. Behind the chair was a sword hanging on the wall of the tent. The right side of the room was covered with a red carpet, and a screen was placed in the middle. On the outside, there was a military bed with neatly folded bedding. There seemed to be a lamp on the other side of the screen, casting the outline of a bathtub on the screen. There was a figure in the bathtub, and it was obvious that the figure was taking a bath. The sound of water splashing could be heard, and Qin Yining saw the figure's arm splashing water. Qin Yining's face immediately turned red. No matter how strong she was still an unmarried girl. Whenever she thought of Lian Xingjia's old and fat body, she felt goosebumps all over her body and nausea churned in her stomach. It seemed that no matter how clear she was when she came, she couldn't remain completely indifferent when she was truly faced with it. Qin Yining bowed and said, "This humble girl from the Qin clan greets your excellency." A low and hoarse male voice came from the other end. He spoke slowly. "Miss Qin, didn't you dislike this official that day? Today you came in the middle of the night. Aren't you afraid that this official will eat you up?" These words were so explicit that Qin Yining was both embarrassed and angry. However, she couldn't do anything about it. She could only say in a low voice, "Your Excellency is a sensible person. You should know why this humble girl is here today." "Oh, then tell me, what is your purpose?" When Qin Yining heard the other party's frivolous tone, she wanted nothing more than to stab him to death with a knife. However, without this person's seal, the peace talks couldn't be carried out. She knew she could only say, "If your excellency is willing to put your seal on the negotiated agreement, this humble girl will naturally fulfill your excellency's request." Haha, this humble girl, you actually know what it means to be loyal to the country. You're actually willing to sacrifice yourself for that incapable ruler of yours? Qin Yining didn't want to pay attention to Lian Xingjia's mockery. She slowly tightened her grip on the dagger in her hand and said, "Does your excellency agree? If I don't agree, what do you plan to do?" The sound of water splashing could be heard. Qin Yining saw a man's figure reflected on the screen. She was so embarrassed that she quickly lowered her head. Then, she heard the rustling of clothes. Following that, she keenly felt a presumptuous gaze fall on her body. An unfamiliar man's aura was getting closer and closer. She lowered her gaze and saw a pair of large bare feet. The muscles and bones on the insteps of those feet were protruding. It was obvious that they were very strong. Qin Yining tightened her grip on the dagger and couldn't help but take a step back. Unexpectedly, in the next instant, she was wrapped around by a pair of iron arms and firmly pressed into a fiery embrace. She suddenly raised her head and was faced with Pang Zhao's handsome face. Yu's long hair was tied up in a bun. When the water dripped from the bun onto the thin, snow-white cloth on his shoulder, a piece of cloth became transparent. Qin Yining's hands pressed hard against his warm chest. She could even feel the soft yet firm muscles under her palms and the strong beating of his heart under his muscles. "Why is it you?" Qin Yining's eyes widened. "If it's not me, do you want it to be Lian Xingjie?" "I'm not. Are you here to throw yourself into Lian Xingjie's arms? Or—" He suddenly grabbed her wrist with one of his large hands. With a skillful move, the dagger in her sleeve fell into his hand. Her body turned in another direction. His large hand firmly grasped her slender waist, and her back was pressed against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder and smelled the fragrance of her neck and neck. He murmured, "Were you here to assassinate me?" Qin Yining didn't expect that the one living in the main tent was not Lian Xingjie. It was the first time for her to be so close to a man. Her brain was about to turn into a pot of paste. She just struggled hard. "Let me go." "No." "Pang Zhishi, let me go." "No, I won't let you go." "What? You can serve Lian Xingjie, but you can't give me a hug?" "You pervert." "I'm a pervert? You took the initiative to offer yourself, and you blame me for being a pervert?" Pang Xiao did not know why he was so angry. His low voice was filled with suppressed anger. His big hand held her waist tightly, and he breathed in the sweet scent of a young girl on her body. He wished he could break her neck with one hand. He didn't dare to imagine what this arrogant girl would have experienced if he didn't kick Lian Xingjie out of the tent and take the main tent for himself. "Tell me, if you met Lian Xingjie today, what would you do? Would you offer yourself to him or assassinate him?" "It's none of your business. Let me go." Qin Yining felt that the person behind her couldn't hide his anger and killing intent. She was alarmed. Her hair stood on end because of her instinctive fear. She used all her strength to struggle. She felt that if she didn't escape, this person would probably strangle her to death. Qin Yining was very strong, but she met Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao felt that her extraordinary strength was because she hated him so much. He couldn't help but be angry. He used a lot of strength to restrain himself from hurting her, but she didn't feel it at all. "You stupid woman who doesn't know what's good for her." Pang Xiao squeezed the words out of his teeth. He held her shoulders and forced her to turn around. He pressed her against him and leaned over to bite her red lips. At first, he didn't want to bite her, but he was intoxicated by her soft and sweet touch. He couldn't bear to bite her even if he wanted to, so he changed from biting to sucking. His big palm pressed the back of her head, and the other hand pinched her chin, forcing her to open her cherry lips so that he could violate her. Qin Yining only heard a bang in her head. Her whole body froze. He dared to kiss her. That day in the tent, he domineeringly said, "my woman," without caring about her feelings. She could barely explain that he was helping her and Qin Huaiyuan out of trouble, so that the Emperor de Zhou wouldn't misunderstand that Qin Huaiyuan didn't want to give her to the Lian Xingjie. But what was this now? This person hid his identity and stayed by her side. He saved her life and befriended her. She treated him as a friend and treated him sincerely. She even wanted to repay him for saving her life. But now he took the opportunity to molest her. Qin Yining's tears welled up in her eyes. She began to struggle with her hands and feet. She whimpered like a small animal. Pang Zhao's anger had long been extinguished by this kiss. Her current appearance was soft and obedient. In his eyes, she was like an angry little bunny. He couldn't help but want to hug and coax her. He moved his lips away and kissed her forehead domineeringly, making a sound. "Okay, don't make trouble. Be good. Who do you think you are? How can you do this?" Qin Yining covered her mouth and rubbed her forehead with the back of her hand. Tears fell down. "Who do I think I am?" Pang Zhao's anger that had just disappeared reignited. He scolded with a cold face. "I am your man. Who do you think I am? You would rather sleep with that bastard Lian Xingjie than with me, right? Go away. I don't want to see you." Qin Yining pushed him away forcefully and ran away when he wasn't paying attention. Pang Xiao was stunned by her words, "I don't want to see you." He heard the sound of something breaking. He was angry and wronged. All kinds of feelings mixed together and finally turned into unspeakable bitterness. He took 2 deep breaths and chased after her. "Stop right there!" Pang Xiao roared. The tiger army outside the tent was stunned when they saw Qin Yining run away. Did she not succeed in throwing herself into his arms? Or was their family's Wang Yi abandoned? Who knew that Pang Xiao would chase after her barefooted in his underwear? When he roared, the tiger army became alert. The patrolling tiger army immediately took out their weapons and chased after him. The Dayan soldiers across the camp also heard Pang Xiao's voice. When they saw the tiger army rushing over with their weapons, they thought that the Dezhou people were going to go back on their word and attack the camp. They all panicked. "Get up, take out your weapons. The Dezhou people are attacking the camp." Qin Huaiyuan and Shui Wenqing quickly put on their clothes and ran out. At the same time, the soldiers of Great Yin drew their weapons and rushed forward, standing in a standoff with the pursuing tiger army. Qin Yining ran to Qin Huaiyuan's side. When he saw his daughter's tear-stained face, Qin Huaiyuan's heart skipped a beat. He quickly grabbed Qin Yining and said, "Sistery, are you okay?" Pang Xiao cursed in his mind, "Stupid woman," then strode over to them. He was wearing only an inner garment, which was half opened and exposed his firm muscles. He stood barefoot in front of the brave tiger army, then pointed his finger at the Great Yan's army and said with a loud voice, Chapter 113. The scene was silent. The tiger army, who originally thought that something big had happened, now completely understood. It turned out that Wang Yi had taken a fancy to a woman. Wang Yi was indeed not an ordinary person. He was so ruthless even when it came to getting a woman. The tiger army, who had always been in awe of Pang Xiao, craned their necks to look at her curiously and playfully. They wanted to see what kind of beauty could move Wang Yi and make him declare his ownership of her with such fanfare. The Dayan people's faces were all ashen. Everyone felt that the emperor's action of asking Grand Preceptor Qin to present his daughter was shameless. Now that Qin Yining was being humiliated in front of his face, it was simply a slap to their faces. The Dezhou soldiers were full of fighting spirit. They clenched their weapons tightly and cursed endlessly. When the tiger army saw the other party's reaction, they also calmed down and prepared for battle. The atmosphere was tense at the slightest touch. Pang Xiao glared fiercely at Qin Yining and waved her hand. "Retreat." The tiger army was well trained. When they heard the military order, they neatly put away their weapons and retreated in unison. Pang Xiao casually returned to her tent barefooted in her underwear. Seeing the other party retreat, the Dayan people all breathed a sigh of relief. After all, the tiger army's combat ability was not only reflected in the commander-in-chief's command and formations, but also in their individual combat ability. Because of the difference in the region and the difference in the daily training, an ordinary soldier of Tiger Troop could defeat 5 of the best soldiers of Great Yin. The gap between them was so huge that it made people feel helpless. Qin Huaiyuan said, "Everyone, go back and guard your positions carefully." Yes. The soldiers retreated. Shui Wenqing looked at Qin Yining, whose tears had not dried yet, and then looked at Qin Huaiyuan, whose brows were tightly knitted. She sighed and turned to go back to her tent. After all, it was humiliating to give one's only legitimate daughter to another man. Shui Wenqing didn't want to ask Qin Huaiyuan what was going on. However, she didn't expect the other party's son, little Wang Yi, to be so interested in Qin Yining. After thinking about it, Shui Wenqing still reported the truth in the secret report sent to Jingdu that night. Grand Preceptor Qin had already sent his legitimate daughter to Lian, but Lian was indifferent. Prince Zhongshuan publicly expressed his love for her. When this secret report reached the capital, the emperor was wild with joy. He was so happy that he could not sleep at night. Little Wang Yi was a war god with a high position and authority. He was Emperor Zhou's sworn brother. If he could get rid of this person, the situation might turn around. Immediately, the emperor fell into a dilemma. He couldn't help but beat his chest and stamp his feet for his mistake. If he had known earlier that little Wang Yi liked Grand Preceptor Qin's daughter, he would have chosen another beautiful woman to bring to the Lian Xingjie. If each of them had one, both of them would be satisfied. Neither of them would want to steal the others and hurt their relationship. If the two of them fought over a woman, it would be bad. The emperor thought about it again, and then issued another edict. He ordered someone to send it to Shihua City at the fastest speed possible. Therefore, at noon the next day, Qin Huaiyuan received the emperor's latest edict. Act according to circumstances. It is important to win the peace talks first. In other words, he would give Qin Yining to whoever could win the peace talks. After Qin Huaiyuan ordered the eunuch to deliver the edict, he smiled faintly at Cui Wenqing. Cui Wenqing felt guilty and helpless. He had followed the edict. In addition to the peace talks, his mission was to monitor Qin Huaiyuan. After all, the emperor was afraid that Qin Huaiyuan would hold a grudge against Qin Huaiyun and become disloyal to Dian. He had no choice but to send secret reports every day. Grand Preceptor Qin, the other party is biding their time. Should we add fuel to the fire? This matter has been delayed for a long time. This official is afraid that the emperor will be anxious. If the emperor was anxious, he could do anything. If the peace talks didn't succeed this time, the emperor might not care about the people's opinions and directly kill their entire families to vent his anger. Qin Huaiyuan naturally understood Cui Wenqing's difficulties and concerns. Let's observe them for one more day. If they still don't succeed, we'll relax the conditions tomorrow. Cui Wenqing nodded. In fact, he had always been very conflicted. When he was negotiating with Qin Huaiyuan, he firmly believed that he had to fight for the greatest benefits for the Dian people. Because they couldn't agree on the conditions, and Lian Xingjie deliberately refused to show up, the peace talks had reached a deadlock. However, he understood that the emperor probably didn't care about how much money and cities they offered. As long as the other party agreed to stop fighting, the emperor would happily give them a promotion. With such an emperor, Cui Wenqing didn't know if he should cry for himself. At this time, Qin Yining was resting in his tent. She hadn't slept all night. As soon as she closed her eyes, she would think about what had happened last night. Pang Zhao's passionate embrace, domineering kiss, angry roar, gentle coaxing, and his declaration in front of everyone, "Sooner or later you'll be mine." These scenes were like different colors of paint that mixed together in her mind, forming a dazzling whirlpool. She didn't understand why Pang Zhao was like this. She was used to analyzing the pros and cons, but when faced with her own problem, her mind was in a mess. For Pang Zhao, she had no value at all. Why would Pang Zhao take the initiative to approach her, get to know her, befriend her, save her life, and save her from Lian Xingjie twice? She didn't want to be so narcissistic as to say that Pang Zhao liked her. But since she had no value, why would he do this? After all, her father was the enemy who had killed Pang Zhao's father. Qin Yining really couldn't understand why he would do this when facing the daughter of his enemy. However, she had to admit that she was glad at this time. Fortunately, she went to the wrong tent, and it wasn't Lian Xingjie inside. Even if she was kissed by Pang Zhao, it was better than giving herself to Lian Xingjie. When she thought of that kiss, the inexperienced her face burned with embarrassment. She turned over and buried her burning red face into the pillow. Although her father didn't ask anything last night, with his intelligence, he definitely knew what she was doing on the other side. There were some things that were inconvenient for father and daughter to say, but they had a tacit understanding. Her plan had failed. She didn't even see the shadow of Lian Xingjie. Well, what about the peace talks? Miss Qin. At this time, a soldier's voice came from outside the tent. That soldier's voice was filled with joy. Miss Qin, Grand Preceptor Qin asks you to immediately go to the command tent. The other side has taken the initiative to negotiate with us. Little Wang Yi said that you must be present. Qin Yining immediately sat up when she heard this. She was stunned for a moment before saying, "I'll go immediately." The other side took the initiative to negotiate? She didn't hear wrong, right? Qin Yining didn't have time to think too much. She tidied her hair, put on a cloak, and went straight to the command tent. As soon as she entered, She saw the bruised and gloomy Lien Xingjie talking to Qin Huaiyuan about something. Pang Xiao, who was wearing a black battle robe, was accompanied by Huzi, who was wearing a bodyguard's uniform. They were hugging a snow-white little rabbit and squatting to the side as they spoke in a low voice. Cui Wenqing awkwardly squatted beside Pang Xiao. Her expression was very stiff. Qin Yining was a bit surprised. A dignified Prince Zhongshuan was actually hugging a little rabbit in the middle of a serious peace talk in a military camp. Qin Yining couldn't help but mock. "Little Wang Yi, are you pretending to be Chang Yi?" Chapter 114. Pang Xiao was originally in a very good mood with the little rabbit in his arms. But who knew that Qin Yining would come in and throw a barrage of sarcasm at him? Pang Xiao's face darkened, and he stood up with the rabbit in his arms. "Here, take it." Qin Yining was very surprised, and his gaze fell on the little rabbit. The little white rabbit was different from a normal rabbit. Its body was slightly chubbier, its cheeks were puffy, and its ears were drooping to the sides. Its entire body was only the size of a palm, and its entire body was covered in snow-white fur. Only its left eye had a dark circle, and it looked indescribably funny. When the tall Pang Xiao brought such a small rabbit in front of him, Qin Yining almost couldn't hold back his smile. "Hey, little Wang Yi, what do you mean by this? I don't deserve a reward for nothing. How could I dare to stop you from pretending to be Chang Yi?" This stupid girl was clearly holding a grudge. He did take advantage of her yesterday, but she didn't think about it. If he hadn't happened to be here, would she still be able to stand here and bicker with him today? He spent a lot of effort to find such a cute little rabbit for her, hoping that she would be appeased. But not only did she not appreciate it, she even mocked him. "It's for you, so you should take it." Pang Xiao's face darkened as he took 2 steps forward and was about to shove the little rabbit into Qin Yining's hands. Qin Yining stepped back and refused to accept it. "I don't want it. You can keep it for yourself." Pang Xiao's face darkened, and a storm gathered in his eyes. He nodded and said, "Okay, you don't want it, right? Then I'll throw it to death." As he spoke, he raised his arm and pretended to throw the rabbit to the ground. Qin Yining jumped in fright and hurriedly tugged at his sleeve. "What are you doing? You're simply being unreasonable. You're the one who refused a toast and insisted on drinking a forfeit." Pang Xiao lowered his raised arm and handed the chubby little rabbit to Qin Yining. "Here, take it." Qin Yining reluctantly took it. It was a soft and warm ball in his hand. The little guy shifted in his palm, and his black eyes looked at Qin Yining with a very pure gaze. Qin Yining felt his heart soften, and he couldn't help but smile. He hugged it with one hand and stroked its back with the other. Pang Xiao thought for a while and then took off the jade pendant from his waist. He took off the small red plum ribbon on it and walked to Qin Yining. Pang Xiao's hands was bent over his head, tied, and was about to ask him what he was doing. He bent down, and their cheeks were very close. He didn't look up at her and focused on tying the bow in his hands. From Qin Yining's angle, she could see his beautiful long eyebrows and long eyelashes when he lowered his head. She couldn't help but frown and look away. "Its name is Bai. This king gave it to you as a token of the peace talks between Dezhou and Dian. If you don't take care of it and treat it badly, this king will treat today's peace talks as null and void." Qin Yining widened her eyes and stared at Pang Xiao in disbelief. "Wang Yi is too childish. Whatever you say. Anyway, this king, Bai, is yours. Do as you see fit." Qin Yining remembered that this person had once said that she looked like his Dabai. He said that Dabai was a pug, and that they had a watchdog named Ahe. Now, this little rabbit was called Bai. Qin Yining really wanted to laugh at the Pang family's naming skills if it wasn't for the occasion. But now, she just wanted to scold Pang Xiao for being unreasonable. Wasn't he the god of war who killed people like scything flax? Why was the Pang Xiao she knew completely different from the one in the rumors? This person was simply a temperamental madman. She lowered her head and looked at the little rabbit wearing a small red plum tassel around its neck. The little rabbit moved into a comfortable position in her hand and looked at her with its big black eyes. Pang Xiao stood in front of Qin Yining with his hands behind his back. He admired the big and small soft rabbit in front of him as if no one else was around. He couldn't help but smile. In his eyes, she was just like air by, soft and obedient. He just wanted to hold her in his arms and caress her hair. Qin Yining looked helplessly at Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan and Shui Wenqing were also watching Qin Yining. Qin Huaiyuan's eyes were calm. No one could tell what he was thinking. Shui Wenqing's face was full of understanding. Qin Yining knew that these people must have misunderstood because of Pang Zhao's tyrannical behavior, and now that he had given her this kind of token, she was forced to put Pang Zhao's label on her. If the peace talks were successful, even if she could return to the capital unscathed, the next thing that awaited her would be the fate of being sent to Pang Xiao. This kind of fate of being manipulated really made her feel helpless. Lian Xingjie felt a wave of anger when he saw that Pang Xiao had used a cheap rabbit to win Qin Yining's favor. He looked at Qin Yining, who was dressed in plain clothes and had a snow-white fur coat around his collar. He was holding a little white rabbit in his fair and jade-like hands. He really looked like Chang Yi. He couldn't help but be mesmerized. What a pity, what a pity. It was his biggest loss that he couldn't have a chance to have sex with a beauty. He wanted to take a closer look, but Pang Xiao had already walked in front of him and blocked his line of sight. Lian Xingjie was so scared that he almost fell from his chair. He had been traumatized by Pang Zhao's beating. The muscles on his face were twitching, and the wounds on his body were hurting terribly. He wished that he could cover his head with his hands to feel a sense of security. However, he was still the Minister of War. Only the heavens knew how much effort Lian Xingjie used to stabilize himself and not make a fool of himself. Pang Xiao stood in front of Lian Xingjie with a faint smile. He was enjoying the sight of Lian Xingjie wishing that he could drill his head under the table. After a while, he said, "Official Lian, have you finished the negotiations?" This official is the commander-in-chief. I am the one in charge of this peace talk. Meeting Pang Zhao's intimidating gaze, Lian Xingjie couldn't help but swallow the rest of his words. Official Lian has delayed the emperor's important matters this time. During the peace talks, you have repeatedly made excuses. This king will definitely report you. You dare to bite back? Lian Xingjie said angrily. It was clearly you who beat this official first. Why do you want to impeach this official? This king beat you? Who saw it? Who can testify for you? It was clearly your own actions that were improper. You failed to take liberties with a woman from a good family, and instead, you were chased and beaten by her father and brother. Official Lian is already so old. You should take care of your family's reputation. You have embarrassed yourself in front of the Yin dynasty. If you aren't ashamed, how are your children going to live? Bullshit. That day, this official's deputy general clearly saw it. Is that so? Then it's up to you. For now, let's use the seal. Pang Xiao leisurely sat down at the side. He leisurely picked up a cup of tea and took a sip. Lian Xingjie was so angry that his entire body trembled. It took him a while to react. Why didn't his deputy general appear these past few days? Thinking of Pang Zhao's usual style of doing things, the hair on Lian Xingjie's back stood up. That deputy general couldn't have been now that he was at the front lines. It would be easy to explain if someone died unjustly. If he was killed, perhaps Pang Xiao would be able to find all kinds of reasons to convince your majesty. If it was someone else, they would be afraid. After all, he had a high position and power. If he wasn't willing to restrain himself, wouldn't that be like a bird waiting to stand out? However, Pang Xiao was different. He didn't do things according to common sense. His temperament was treacherous and changeable. Sometimes he was steady, sometimes he was cunning. He could pretend to be an elegant scholar, but he could also be a scoundrel. This person was simply an unfathomable pain in the neck. Lian Xingjie's heart was cold. He no longer hesitated and used his personal and official seals on the peace treaty. Qin Huaiyuan and Shui Wenqing heaved a huge sigh of relief when they saw that both parties had stamped their seals on the 2 copies of the treaty. Pang Xiao also smiled. He crossed his legs and said, "That's good. In the future, we won't fight anymore. We'll resume trade and diplomatic relations and live a peaceful life." He turned around and smiled wickedly at Qin Yining. This way, this king can visit your Dian and see what the rich and populace of Dian looks like. Qin Yining's face turned red from his smile. He cursed in his heart. You're talking like a human, but that's not a human's expression. You're just a dandy. Qin Huaiyuan stood up and exchanged some pleasantries with Lian Xingjie and Pang Xiao. After exchanging some pleasantries, they bid each other farewell. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining and said, "You have to treat Erbai well." Qin Yining rolled his eyes at him. He lowered his head and stroked the rabbit. "What kind of name did you give it?" "One poor two white, one poor two white." "Haven't you heard of it before?" Pang Xiao was stunned. He crossed his arms and thought for a moment. "Now that you've said it, it doesn't sound good. What do you think it should be called?" Qin Yining felt that this person was extremely boring. Not only did he tie the rabbit up, he even gave it a name. However, he also felt that he was being nosy. He actually fussed over the name of the rabbit with an idiot like Pang Zhishi. Qin Yining carried the rabbit and turned to leave. "Forget it. I'll call it Erbai." Pang Xiao chuckled and chased after him. "Ah, do you also think that this king's name is good?" Qin Yining didn't even bother to look back. The tiger army looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. Pang Xiao finally regained his composure. He regained his composure and ordered his men to break camp. Huzi followed beside him. He had been holding back his laughter for a long time. At this moment, he didn't dare to laugh out loud. He lowered his head and followed Pang Xiao into the distance. The Dian people cheered thunderously when they heard that the peace talks had come to an end. A group of people prepared to break camp. Qin Huaiyuan and Shui Wenqing brought Qin Yining back to the city first. When they came, they were determined to die. Their hearts were heavy. When they returned, everyone was laughing and jumping for joy. It was even more joyous than the new year. Qin Huaiyuan had already sent someone back to deliver a message. Therefore, when everyone arrived at the city gates, General Wang Hui and Magistrate Liu had already opened the gates. When the people heard the good news that the peace talks had come to an end, they all rushed over as if they were attending a temple fair. They lined the streets to welcome and cheer loudly. The news that little Wang Yi had fallen in love with Grand Preceptor Qin's daughter at first sight spread throughout Xihua City as if it had grown wings. Everyone knew that Miss Qin had followed Grand Preceptor Qin to the military camp. She had been chosen by little Wang Yi at first sight. That pervert Lian Xingjie had no chance to get close to Miss Qin. Chapter 115. Bing Tang and Song Lan listened to Qin Yining's recount of the events of the past few days and were stunned. So that means that young Master Yao is Dezhou's Prince Zhongshuan, the rumored homicidal maniac who drinks raw meat and drinks blood? Bing Tang's eyes widened. Qin Yining nodded. But it seems that he is not like the rumors. Oh my God! I actually had so many chances to kill him with a single needle. Bing Tang spun on the spot. No wonder his aura is different from ordinary people, and he has such powerful martial arts skills. But I don't understand. Grand Preceptor Qin is clearly the person who killed the Protector General of the country by sowing discord. Thinking about it, you are little Wang Ye's enemy's daughter. His hatred for his father's murder is irreconcilable, yet he still treats you so differently. This is really puzzling. Song Lan stroked Qin Yining's little rabbit and smiled. Then what else do you not understand? Even heroes have a weakness for beauties. Our Lady is born with such beauty. Not to mention others. Even those who serve her every day can't help but take a few more glances at her, let alone little Wang Yi. Lady, look at how thoughtful little Wang Yi is. He even sent you a little rabbit to accompany you. This little rabbit is really cute. Erbai seemed to understand Song Lan's praise. It rubbed its little head against Song Lan's palm and turned its little butt, wanting to jump off the bed. Qin Yining bent down to put it down and saw air by hopping to the door. It looked like it wanted to go out, but couldn't. It wants to go out? Bing Tang curiously went forward and opened the door for Erbai. Erbai hopped out of the room, shaking its little round butt. A moment later, Bing Tang returned with Erbai in her arms. She said with a smile, "Young Prince Pang really knows how to send gifts. Is this little rabbit a spirit?" You even know to go to the toilet by yourself." The soft, cute, and furry little animal was very likable. Not only did Qin Yining like it, but Bing Tang and Songlan also liked Airbai very much. After carefully cleaning Airbai, they carried it back to Qin Yining. Qin Yining hugged Airbai and looked at the bright red plum blossom fringe on its neck. She thought of the arrogant man who had bent down and gently tied the fringe around the little rabbit's neck. She couldn't help but frown and blush. Bing Tang and Song Lan looked at each other. Bing Tang smiled and said, "Miss, don't think too much. Didn't you say that everything will be fine when it comes to it? Previously, we thought that the future of this peace talk was bleak, but didn't we come here safely? Moreover, I'll be honest with you. Please don't be angry with me." While speaking, Bing Tang squatted down beside Qin Yining. She touched her bai's head with one finger and said, "I think young Prince Pang is not a bad person. Now there are many rumors in the city. If it's about you and Lien, I can't wait to kill that lecher. But if it's about you and young Prince Pang, I think you two are a perfect match." Song Lan nodded in agreement. "That's right. Little Wang, he has saved your lifetime and time again. This time, he didn't just save your life at the immortal Taoist temple. If it weren't for Little Wang Yi stirring up trouble in the military camp, you wouldn't have been able to escape from Little Wang Ye's evil clutches. Even if the Grand Preceptor had protected you, the Emperor would have blamed you. After he stirred up trouble, who would the Emperor blame?" Qin Yining's face turned even redder after hearing their words. They didn't see how excessive this person was. She couldn't tell others how Pang Xiao had molested her and how he had forcefully kissed her. Although that person had a bad mouth and always liked to tease her, he still acted like a gentleman. She didn't expect that he would reveal his true colors in the military camp. He really looked like a devil incarnate. Seeing that Qin Yining was blushing and didn't speak, Song Lan and Bing Tang also tactfully kept quiet. After all, women in this world were weak. For a woman like Qin Yining, her future was never up to her. If they said too much and changed the young lady's character, what if fate had other arrangements in the future? Wouldn't they be sad? The two ordered people to prepare hot water for Qin Yining to wash up. Qin Yining declined the dinner party set by Magistrate Liu and fell into a deep sleep. She was so worried in the military camp that she couldn't eat or sleep for several days. This time, she slept soundly and didn't wake up until dawn the next day. Qin Huayuan and Shui Wenqing had a discussion and decided that they shouldn't delay in Xihua City. They sent people back to the capital early to deliver a letter to the emperor and tell him the good news of the successful peace talks. They only slightly reorganized themselves before leaving Xihua City. When they left, the common people lined the streets to send them off. Some people even shouted the name Wise Panin. Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Song Lan sat in the carriage. They couldn't bear the excitement outside and curiously lifted the curtains to look outside. Bing Tang said in a low voice, "The two of us didn't do anything, but we can bask in the glory of Master and Miss and have a taste of being loved. This is the fox borrowing the tiger's power." When Qin Yining heard this, she gently held Bing Tang's hand. Bing Tang had a hard life. The Tang family didn't survive. If they could survive, the common people would love and respect Imperial Dr. Tang. Bing Tang seemed to understand what Qin Yining was thinking, so he smiled brightly at her. Song Lan had been looking outside the whole time. At this moment, he suddenly said, "Miss, look, isn't that little Wang Yi outside?" Qin Yining leaned over and looked in the direction Song Lan was pointing. She saw two men holding horses behind the convoy. They were wearing ordinary cotton cloaks, and half of their faces were covered by the fur collar. Looking carefully, who else could it be but Pang Xiao and Huzi? What were the two of them doing? As if sensing Qin Yining's gaze, Pang Xiao, who had a cold face, looked at the carriage. The moment his eyes met with Qin Yining's, he suddenly grinned. Qin Yining's heart trembled when she saw his smile. She put down the warm curtains. Pang Xiao touched his nose, and his face became cold again. He practiced smiling in front of the bronze mirror for a long time. "It can't be this ugly, right?" In the carriage, Song Lan said, "They disguised themselves and followed us out of the city. Are they going to the capital? I'm afraid that's not good." Unconsciously, Qin Yining stroked air by from head to toe, stroking its fur. After a while, she finally calmed down her heartbeat and said, "Now that the peace talks have succeeded, Great Zhou has withdrawn its army from its seclusion, and the diplomatic relations between the two dynasties have been restored. Even if they were to walk freely in the land of Great Yin Dynasty, no one would find fault with them." Bing Tang said, "Perhaps it's just on the way. Miss, don't take it to heart. As long as they don't have any ill intentions, there's nothing to be afraid of." Song Lan heard this and nodded. The convoy left Xihua City and sped up. Qin Yining observed them several times and found that Pang Xiao and Hu Zi hadn't caught up with the team. She found it strange that these two people's speed was so slow, but she didn't think too much about it. When they came, they felt that the road ahead was long and bumpy. On the way back, everyone was anxious to return home. Even their footsteps were much lighter. The journey that took them 2 days on the way back only took a day and a half. On the afternoon of the 29th, the group of carriages arrived outside of Jingdou. The emperor knew that the peace talks had been successful and that everyone was on their way back. He had already arranged for eunuchs to wait in front of the city gates. When they saw Qin Huayuan's group, the eunuch, who was wearing an iron gray eunuch uniform, respectfully bowed. He smiled and said, "Grand Preceptor Qin, official Chui, the emperor's order is for you to set up camp outside the city for the night. Tomorrow morning, the emperor will hold a welcoming ceremony and will personally lead all the officials out of the city to welcome you." Qin Huayan smiled and said, "Yes, I'll have to trouble eunuch to convey the emperor's words to me. I deeply admire the emperor's painstaking efforts." "Grand Preceptor Qin, you are the emperor's trusted aide. It is only natural that the emperor values you." The eunuch looked at the carriage at the back of the convoy and smiled. The emperor also ordered for Grand Preceptor Qin to arrange for Miss Qin to enter the city first. After all, there will be many people at the ceremony tomorrow. Was the emperor afraid that people would gossip behind his back? Was he using a woman to negotiate? However, Qin Huayuan wanted nothing more than to send Qin Yining back first, so that his daughter would not be under everyone's suspicious and speculative gazes. Therefore, Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "The emperor is indeed thoughtful. I would never have thought of this. I will immediately order people to send my daughter into the city." "Many thanks, eunuch." The eunuch respectfully bowed to Qin Huayuan and Chui Wenqing, then took his leave and returned to the palace to report on the completion of his task. Qin Huayuan and Chui Wenqing ordered people to set up camp outside the city. They also arranged for about 10 people to escort Qin Yining back to the mansion first. "When you see the dowager madam, please comfort her. Tell her that father will return to the mansion after the ceremony tomorrow." Qin Huayuan instructed Qin Yining, "Daughter understands. I won't let the dowager madam worry." Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "There are some things that can be said during the peace talks, and some things that can't be said. You have to be careful. Daughter knows what to do and won't speak carelessly. After all, this is a secret of the imperial court." Qin Yining agreed with a smile. Qin Huayuan knew that Qin Yining was very intelligent, so he felt relieved and smiled. "Fortunately, we all came back safely. The days ahead will be good. There is still hope." "Yes." Qin Yining looked at Qin Huayuan and couldn't help but smile. After this trip to negotiate, Qin Yining had a deeper understanding of Qin Huayuan. His admiration for his father had also deepened. After exchanging a few words with Qin Huayuan, Qin Yining boarded the carriage and led his people into the capital. When they passed by the cloud treading in, Qin Yining alighted and went to see Master Zhong. When Master Zhong saw that Qin Yining had returned, he was so happy that he knelt down and kowtowed to all the gods and Buddhas in the sky. "I'm relieved that young lady is back." Qin Yining helped Master Zhong up and smiled. "I've troubled you these past few days. Did anything big happen in the capital while I was away?" "Nothing else. I just heard that the Crown Prince had a big quarrel with the Duke of Ning. The Duke of Ning was so angry that he chased the Crown Prince out of the mansion. Our people only heard the private conversations of the customers and didn't know whether it was true or not. In any case, everyone was saying that the Crown Prince's brain wasn't clear. He only had one backer, but he actually made a big fuss about it. How could he compete with the demon empress in the future? Qin Yining thought of the crown prince's absurd behavior on the day of the trip. When he combined it with what Master Zhong said, there was nothing he didn't understand. He couldn't help but say, it's hard to say if the Duke of Ning was reliable in the past. Master Zhong was also a shrewd person. He understood with one sentence. He smiled and nodded, then said seriously, there's one more thing. It's about your mansion. Chapter 116. Shopkeeper Zhong said, if it were anything else, it would not be this lowly one's turn to know. It's just that this matter is very important. I also heard from the customers that the Empress sent an imperial decree to summon your mother a few days ago. Qin Yining turned pale with fright when she heard this. Her white cheeks seemed a little pale. Qin Yining knew the temper of the Sun clan very well. The Sun clan was a group of people who would cause trouble for no reason, not to mention the relationship between the Chao family and the Ding general manor. If the Empress didn't find trouble with the Sun clan would inevitably have a verbal conflict with her. Moreover, the Empress summoned the Sun clan for no reason. It was impossible that she had good intentions. Qin Yining asked anxiously, how is my mother? We really don't know. But I think it won't be a big problem for the Empress to summon someone like Madame Grand Preceptor. Qin Yining nodded and took a few deep breaths to calm down. She was a little anxious to go home. Someone is waiting for me outside. I'll go back to the manor first. It's not good to keep the elders in the manor waiting. Let's talk about business another day. Master Zhong nodded understandingly and politely sent Qin Yining to the carriage. Qin Yining was anxious to go home. She repeatedly urged the coachman to speed up. In fact, she was worried about the Sun clan when she set off for Xihua City. But at that time, she couldn't even protect herself. She didn't even know if she could come back alive. She couldn't care so much about other things. Naturally, she didn't have the spare energy to take care of the Sun clan. Qin Yining felt a little guilty. She was so complacent that she didn't go home immediately after returning to the city. She even had the mind to check on her property first. Bing Tang and Song Lan saw Qin Yining's serious expression. They thought something bad might have happened to the magistrate, so they were a little worried. The carriage sped all the way back to Qin Mansion. When the gatekeeper saw that it was Qin Yining who came back, he was momentarily stunned. Song Lan and Bing Tang were also quick-witted. They instructed these people to bring the soldiers who had returned from the escort to drink wine. They also sent someone inside to report to old Madam. Only then did the doorman react and order someone to rush in to pass on the message. Qin Yining handed over the escorts to the steward and instructed them to reward them. Then, he brought Bing Tang and Song Lan to old Madam Ci Xiao Garden. Meanwhile, in Ci Xiao Garden, when old Madam received news of Qin Yining's return, she couldn't sit still. She put on a cloak with large sleeves and quickly walked out with Mammy Qin's support. Qin Yining had just passed through the hall of Ci Xiao Garden when he saw the old madam draped in a tea-gold-colored cloak embroidered with longevity patterns. Grandmother, I.O. My sister E. Old Madam sped up her footsteps. However, her small feet couldn't walk fast. When she walked too fast, she took 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Her body was also somewhat swaying, causing her gold and jadeite hair ornament to also shake. It reflected her luxurious and jeweled appearance. Grandmother, granddaughter is back. Qin Yining came close, lifted her skirt, and knelt down. She first saluted the old madam in a proper manner. Old madam supported Qin Yining with both hands and repeatedly said, Good, it's good that you're back. Where's your father? Qin Yining smiled and said, Father is still outside the city. He ordered me to come back first. When she heard that Qin Huayuan had also returned safely, old madam beamed with joy and said, when they came to reply, I thought that this group of little monkeys were coaxing this old woman. I didn't expect you to really come back. The head maidservants Ji Xiang and Ru Yi, as well as the other maidservants and senior servants in the courtyard, were all at the side. When they heard this, they all laughed and came forward to salute Qin Yining. The scene was very lively. Old Madam pulled Qin Yining's hands and looked him up and down. She didn't find any clues, so she said, "Come in with grandmother first to talk." She then instructed Mammy Qin, "Lu Juan, quickly send someone to tell Lao and the maidservants that Sister E is back. Tell them to quickly come over. Dinner will be here." "Yes." Mammy Qin agreed with a smile. Old Madam held Qin Yining's hand and went up the stairs into the room. Naturally, there were maidservants who helped the two take off their cloaks. They bypassed the carved screen and went to the inner room. The two sat down on the arhood bed with a red mattress by the window. Old Madam instructed Ji Xiong to bring a brass hand warmer for Qin Yining. She also asked the maidservants to serve tea and snacks. Then, she asked, "Why didn't your father come back with you? How did the peace talks go?" When she saw Qin Yining, she asked about Qin Huayuan twice in a row before asking about the peace talks. How could Qin Yining not understand what was most important in Old Madam's heart? She had long understood Old Madam, so she didn't get angry. She smiled and said, replying to grandmother, "Father and Shui Darren of the Ministry of Rights were ordered to set up camp outside the city. The Emperor's decree is to hold a grand welcoming ceremony tomorrow morning. He will lead the officials to personally welcome Father and his party into the city to celebrate the success of the peace talks." When Old Madam heard this, she clapped her hands and smiled from the corners of her eyes. "Good, good. Did your trip go smoothly?" Replying to Old Madam, "Everything went smoothly. Father's talent is outstanding. Granddaughter only needed to watch from the sidelines. Father successfully completed the peace talks. It's really admirable." Chapter 117. When the Dowager Madam met Qin Yining's gaze, her expression became somewhat awkward. She smiled placatingly at her and said, "Sister E, come sit next to grandmother." Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. She calmly sat next to the Dowager Madam and looked at her with her large, clear eyes. When the Dowager Madam saw her clear and pure gaze, a sense of guilt arose in her heart. She held Qin Yining's slender and fair hand with her dry hand and patted it. When the elderly's hand was wrapped around Qin Yining's hand, she couldn't help but want to pull her hand back. However, she forced herself not to move. When the Dowager Madam saw her being obedient, she said with a gentle expression, "Sister E, don't be anxious. Your mother went to the palace a few days ago." "Mother is still living in the palace at this time?" "That's right. However, you don't have to worry. Your concubine Xiao went with your mother. It's good for her to live in the palace and relax so that your mother won't be on the verge of death all day. This time, your mother and concubine Xiao can have a good chat." Was this even something a human would say? Qin Yining's heart was instantly filled with anger. The blood in her chest seemed to have turned into magma and surged through her veins. Her face instantly turned red from anger. She forced herself to maintain her composure and said with a smile, "So that's how it is. Did Her Highness the Empress summon us?" As she said this, she sized up everyone's expressions. She saw that Second Madam and Third Madam were looking down and didn't say anything. However, her cousin's expressions were clear at a glance. They were all somewhat embarrassed and worried. Qin Yining understood that the Empress probably didn't summon the Sun Clan. They probably entered the palace for other reasons. However, the Dowager Madam didn't feel embarrassed at all. She smiled and said, "Don't worry. Your concubine Xiao also wants to get along well with your mother. She also takes pity on your maternal family and knows that your mother is depressed. That's why she wanted to bring her into the palace to relax. So that's how it is. Concubine Xiao is really a considerate person." Qin Yining's voice was still as calm and gentle as usual. "How many days has mother been in the palace?" When Old Madam saw that Qin Yining didn't fly into a rage like she had imagined, she liked it a lot. She smiled and said, "The second day after you left, your mother went to the palace." "I got it?" Qin Yining thought for a moment and understood the whole story. The origin of this matter was most likely due to the fact that old Madam wanted to curry favor with Chao Shi. She wanted Chao Shi to bring the Sun Clan into the palace to torment them as she pleased and humiliate the Sun Clan in order to elevate Chao Shi. However, there was another point that old Madam might not be able to think of. Qin Yining smiled warmly and said, I presume that before concubine Mother Chao entered the palace, she also greeted Her Majesty the Empress. Without waiting for anyone to answer, Qin Yining stood up and said, This time, my father and I went out to participate in the peace talks. It's the same as His Majesty putting the burden of Dian's survival on my father's shoulders. Although we are a rich and populous village, we have been in deficit for many years. At this time, we are like a weak woman who has lost the ability to resist walking in front of bandits with a big bag of silver. Not only can we not protect the silver, we also can't protect ourselves. My father is a peerless talent, and his reputation is widespread. Old Madam, what do you think His Majesty is most afraid of when he allowed my father to go out for peace talks? When Qin Yining spoke, his back was ramrod straight. Although there was a smile on his face, his aura was very intimidating. When everyone looked at him, they all thought of Qin Huaiyuan, who usually had a stern face. Although Qin Yining didn't mix in the officialdom, his wild nature of being able to survive even when he was an enemy of wild beasts didn't add any deterrence to her. Old Madam looked at Qin Yining's face and thought of what Aiko had said to her before. Her expression changed in an instant. She stared blankly at Qin Yining. Her face, which was originally full of smiles, gradually turned pale. She said with lingering fear, What His Majesty is afraid of is naturally. She didn't say the rest, but everyone wasn't stupid. They all understood what she meant. Second Madam and Third Madam looked at each other. Qin Huaining, Third Young Miss, and the others also had serious expressions. Correct, Qin Yining said with a smile. His Majesty is worried that my father will defect to the enemy at the last moment. Naturally, he will think of a way to restrict my father. What is my father's biggest restriction? Could it be only my mother? Qin Yining slowly walked in front of the old madam and said with a smile, However, fortunately, my father and I succeeded in the peace talks, and I returned safely. The family's crisis can also be resolved. She looked at the old madam with a penetrating gaze, then looked at the two aunts. She then said with a smile, Otherwise, whether it's someone who wants to take advantage of my father's absence in the capital, or someone who wants to take advantage of my absence in the capital, they won't be able to obtain what they want. Let's not talk about whether what my father and I have will be difficult for others to obtain. Just by looking at the fact that we are all members of the family Qin, our lives are tied together. Isn't it obvious that when the nest is overturned, no eggs can remain intact? It wasn't that Qin Yining had the heart of a villain. It was just that these people's surprise and hostility towards her return were too obvious. The family Qin hadn't been separated yet. Qin Huaiyan was the eldest son of the eldest branch, and he was the backbone of the family Qin. Second uncle was the second son of the first wife. He was also an official, but his position wasn't high. He had always been suppressed in the imperial court. Third uncle was the son of a concubine. He was in charge of business and was the economic lifeline of the family Qin. When Qin Huaiyuan was present, the second and third branches each had their own duties. But if Qin Huaiyuan wasn't here, the second and third branches would become restless. The second son of the first wife felt that he could inherit the family business. The son of a concubine felt that he was the economic lifeline. Why should he give the money he earned to others? They didn't dare to talk about splitting the family in front of Qin Huaiyuan, but behind the scenes, everyone had made a lot of calculations. As for her, without mentioning anything else, if she wasn't here, the Zhaoyan agency in their hands would be a big fat piece of meat. She and her father knew that the emperor wanted the Zhaoyan agency, but the people in the family didn't know. Perhaps seeing her come back alive, those who had fantasized about the ownership of the Zhaoyan agency would be very regretful. Qin Yining's gaze fell on Qin Huaining. Qin Huaining would definitely be regretful, because Qin Huaining believed that she was Qin Huaiyuan's adopted daughter. She had also once called Duchess Ding as her maternal grandmother. If she wasn't here, Then naturally another granddaughter would take over the things that her maternal grandmother gave her. And now that the Sun Clan had seen through Qin Huaning's sinister schemes, they naturally wouldn't allow the Zhaoyan agency to fall into Qin Huaning's hands. Therefore, the existence of the Sun Clan was a stumbling block to Qin Huaning's plan. These simple-minded people, who only saw the petty benefits in front of them, didn't think that if the peace talks failed, or if Shi and Qin Huaiyuan didn't come back, they would probably lose their lives. What else could they scheme against them? Qin Yining wasn't saying alarmist words to scare them. Instead, he uncovered these reasons and let them think about it themselves. If they could become more afraid the more they thought about it, then it could be considered a punishment. The old madam's face was snow-white. Even second madam and third madam's expressions were very awkward and unsightly. Qin Huaning's face was even more snow-white. She pursed her lips and stared blankly for a moment. When she saw Qin Yining looking at her, she didn't show any weakness and waited. However, her hand that was constantly wringing her handkerchief betrayed her nervousness. At this moment, old madam finally understood. So you're saying that Madam Chow wants to bring your mother into the palace? Perhaps it's His Majesty's idea? It's most likely like that. What kind of person is she? Qiu Lu sighed and said, that can't be helped. Without Missy around, Madam doesn't have a backbone. Huaning Miss will only add fuel to the fire in front of the old madam. It's not like you don't know the old madam's temper. She will lose her sense of direction with just a few words. I think she will lose her sense of direction. Bing Tang used a needle to poke the soles of the shoes. Song Lan made a hushed gesture and turned to look at Qin Yining. Qiu Lu changed the topic and said, Miss, while you were away, a few people from our master's study also left. Qin Yining came back to his senses and said with a smile, I found out that Luya and the two maidservants are missing. Did they go to Snow Pear Courtyard? Even if they saw the sea of people today, it was still very interesting. The girls leaned against the window and watched while whispering to each other. Qin Yining stood by the window on the far right side. He could see the city gates with just a tilt of his head. She saw that the clean street extended to the front of the city gate. Suddenly, a person on a horse galloped over. That person was wearing an iron-gray eunuch's uniform. He shouted loudly, The Emperor and the Empress have returned to the city. As soon as his voice fell, the sound of firecrackers exploded. Green smoke rose everywhere, and red dust flew everywhere. The commoners all laughed happily and repeatedly applauded. The womenfolk of the family Qin restaurant couldn't help but crane their necks to look outside. At the large city gates, the Emperor and Empress walked at the front, followed by Qin Huaiyuan and the Crown Prince. Behind them were the civil and military officials dressed in neat official robes and arranged according to their ranks. Qin Huaiyuan, who was dressed in a red official robe and had a tall and straight posture, looked particularly out of the ordinary in contrast to the officials with varying appearances. Upon closer inspection, there was a bit of an immortal aura. The Emperor wore a bright yellow dragon robe and held the Empress, who was dressed in a red phoenix robe. Under the protection of the guards, they walked down the street and waved to the commoners on both sides of the road. It was unknown whether the commoners were doing it themselves, or if they had already arranged for someone to take the lead. Suddenly, someone loudly shouted, Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empress! The Emperor is blessed and blessed. Today, the weather will be smooth. Following this, the commoners all bowed. The womenfolk of the family Qin restaurant all bowed when the Emperor passed by the drunken, immortal restaurant. They didn't dare to look directly at the Emperor. The Dowager Duchess led the womenfolk to kneel on the ground. She continuously nagged, He really is the son of our family Qin restaurant. His ancestors have accumulated merit and brought glory to our family Qin restaurant. Not only was the Dowager Duchess proud, Qin Yining also felt very proud. After all, to be able to reach Qin Huayuan's position as an official, his grace and glory had already reached the peak of his life. This was something that many people wished for, but couldn't obtain. Who knew that just as Qin Yining was thinking this, he suddenly heard a commotion outside. He could faintly hear the cries and curses of the commoners. Chapter 119. The 20 or so assassins were all dressed as commoners. Today, there were so many people, and the scene was so crowded that no one would pay attention to the assassins if they blended in with the crowd. In addition, they knew that the emperor would have arranged for a large number of troops to protect him. No one would have thought that someone would choose this time to assassinate him. The assassins held steel knives and clubs as they rushed out of the crowd and headed straight for the Celestial Empress. The Imperial Guards and the people from the Warden's office of the 5 cities met the assassins head-on. The commoners had never seen such a scene before. They were so scared that they kept retreating, afraid that they would be implicated. However, there were too many people. The commoners pushed and shoved each other as they ran. Some people fell to the ground and were trampled by the people running for their lives. Before the assassins could kill the emperor, the commoners' lives were already in danger in the chaos. The Dowager Duchess was so scared that she screamed, "My main goober! Heavens! Go and save them! Go and save them!" Qin Huayuan was very close to the Celestial Empress and the Crown Prince. Although they were heavily protected, the assassins' knives and swords were always aimed at them. Qin Yining was so scared that her face turned pale, and her heart almost stopped beating. The fatuous emperor and the demon empress deserved to die, but her father deserved to die. Qin Yining hated that she wasn't a man and didn't practice profound martial arts. Her little bit of brute force wasn't worth mentioning here. She could only watch as her father was in danger. The women folk screamed in fear, and the streets were in chaos. The adults screamed, the children cried, and the screams and shouts of fighting and killing were so piercing that it hurt one's eardrums. Qin Yining didn't scream like her cousins. Instead, she leaned against the window and stared at the situation on the street. At this time, a few assassins had already broken through the Imperial Guard's encirclement and were heading straight for the Celestial Empress. Qin Yining realized that these people's targets were the fatuous emperor and the demon empress, not Qin Huayuan. Seeing this, Qin Yining was slightly relieved. If the demon empress and the fatuous emperor died, this country might be able to recover its prosperity. However, she was afraid that the knives and swords had no eyes and would hurt Qin Huayuan. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly heard a series of screams coming from the direction of the city gate. Qin Yining looked in the direction of the sound and saw more than 10 men dressed in Dezhou's military uniform rushing into the crowd, brandishing their swords and chopping left and right, not even sparing the common people. They rushed straight toward Qin Huayuan's direction, shouting, "Take down Qin Ming!" The moment the Dowager Duchess heard this, her eyes rolled back and she fainted on the spot. Qin Yining clutched the window frame so tightly that he didn't even realize that his fingernails were bleeding. Looking at these people, Qin Yining was reminded of the people who had tried to assassinate him at the Fairy Temple. Both of them were equally tall, and their moves were equally ruthless. Although Qin Yining didn't know martial arts, looking at the masked men dressed as commoners and the people dressed in Dezhou's military uniform, it was clear that they were two different groups of people. Qin Yining didn't understand why Qin Huayuan, a person who had contributed greatly to the country and had always had a good reputation, would be assassinated after the peace talks were successful. The fatuous emperor and the demon empress should have died a long time ago, but her father shouldn't. Unless these people weren't dying people. Qin Yining had a flash of inspiration, and his expression became even more serious. The streets were in chaos. The commoners and the officials who were following behind them had already fled without a trace, and those who could hide had hidden in the shops on the side of the road. The two groups of assassins gathered in the middle. and they actually had the power to break through. Qin Yining saw that the imperial bodyguards and the people from the warden's office of the five cities were somewhat powerless, and cold sweat trickled down his forehead. If her father was really in danger, she would rather lose her life and rush down to save him. Suddenly, 10 people dressed in black embroidered robes and wearing silver masks with swords and sabers in their hands leaped over the city walls and leaped over the eaves and walls. Qin Yining saw these people and felt a chill in his heart. Were these people also assassins? Her father might not be able to keep his life. Just as Qin Yining was at his wit's end, these people split into two groups and rushed into the midst of the assassins. Like two black daggers, they actually suppressed the two groups of assassins and quickly gained an overwhelming advantage. These silver-masked men were clearly well-trained and had excellent martial arts. Moreover, among the 10 of them, there was even a petite and slender woman. While Qin Yining was still in shock, the two groups of assassins had already been slaughtered by the 10 people and the imperial bodyguards. Some were dead, some were injured, and most of them were captured alive. Qin Yining finally succeeded in controlling the situation, and he let out a sigh of relief. The emperor and empress had been scared into hiding in the crowd, and now they were finally relieved. The 10 silver-masked men quickly walked up to the emperor and bowed. The masked woman in the lead loudly said, "This subordinate came late to save you. Please forgive this subordinate." The emperor patted his chest with lingering fear and waved his hand. "You can all rise." "Fortunately, I am unharmed. If you dare to come late again, I will not let you off easily. Many thanks to the emperor for not killing us." The woman loudly replied and kowtowed. The other 9 people behind her also kowtowed. The emperor coughed and finally calmed down. "Take these assassins to the Ministry of Justice's prison and thoroughly investigate them. I would like to see who it is that wants to kill me." As soon as the emperor's voice fell, he heard a plop sound. He turned around and saw the men wearing de Zhou's military uniform all fall to the ground with purplish-black blood seeping out of the corners of their mouths. Just like at Xian Gu Temple, they had bitten open their poison sacs and committed suicide. Qin Yining's brows furrowed as he watched. He was already certain that these people were not from de Zhou. The two countries had just reached an agreement. So how could de Zhou be so stupid as to send people to assassinate Qin Huaiyuan and ruin the peace talks? It had to be known that the money and cities promised by the Dian imperial court had not been sent yet. Qin Yining felt that he couldn't think of anyone who would send men of sacrifice to sow discord. The emperor angrily roared, "Rice buckets, a bunch of rice buckets. There are so many of you. So why can't you stop these people from committing suicide? I haven't even found out the truth, yet they are already dead. What use do I have for you?" The assassins dressed as commoners were enlightened and followed suit, planning to bite their tongues. However, with the previous group of people's actions, the guards hurriedly dislocated the lower jaws of the assassins. There were a few who were quick to speak, but they only bit their tongues a little and didn't die. The emperor saw that there were still so many people left to investigate, and let out a sigh of relief. "Let's return to the palace. Leave this matter to the 5 cities warden's office and the Ministry of Justice to investigate. I want to see the results within 3 days." "Yes." Official Su of the 5 cities warden's office responded with a bitter expression. Qin Yining furrowed his brows as he looked in the direction of Qin Huaiyuan. Fortunately, the danger was averted and his father wasn't injured. The Dowager Duchess had been saved from being pinched. After confirming that Qin Huaiyuan was fine, she also let out a sigh of relief. Qin Yining watched as Qin Huaiyuan was about to get into the carriage. Only then did he remember that the Sun clan was still in the palace. She hurriedly led Bing Tang and the others downstairs. Just as she arrived at the entrance of Drunken Immortal Restaurant, her gaze met with Qin Huaiyuan, who was getting into the carriage. Qin Huaiyuan saw that Qin Yining was here and frowned slightly. He thought for a moment, then called over a small eunuch who was accompanying him and whispered a few words to him. The eunuch nodded repeatedly and turned to walk towards Qin Yining. The women folk didn't go out all year round. They were used to living a comfortable and wealthy life. They had never seen such a killing scene. The timid sixth miss was so scared that she wet her pants on the spot. She still felt a little hot after returning to the foo and changing her clothes. Old Madam hurriedly instructed people to cook a medicinal soup that could calm the nerves and suppress the shock. She instructed everyone to take a bowl. The rest of the sisters were not like this. Only the sixth young miss was like this. She really felt embarrassed. At this time, the sixth young miss was blushing and burying her head. She was lying on the Arhood bed in Old Madam's inner room. A dignified, unmarried young miss was so scared that she wet her pants. Second Madam felt that she had lost face, and her expression was very ugly. Third Madam had the intention to mock the second branch. She glanced at the calm Chin Ening and sighed. In the end, Sister E is steady. She takes after eldest brother-in-law's temperament. She is calm and composed when encountering trouble. I think that there are few girls in our family who can compare to Sister Yi's temperament. Chin Ening raised his eyebrows upon hearing this. Was third aunt praising her or making hatred for her? Sure enough, after these words came out, everyone had an embarrassed expression on their faces. Second Madam looked at Chin Ening and tactfully refused to respond to Third Madam's words. However, the sixth young miss, who was lying on the Arhood bed, suddenly sat up and angrily glared at Third Madam. After all, she was a junior. Moreover, she was a concubine-born daughter who had been grounded by her parents several times. She didn't dare to make an enemy out of the third branch, who controlled the economy. She could only vent her anger on Chin Ening. Fourth older sister is, of course, amazing. How can ordinary unmarried young misses like us be as experienced and knowledgeable as fourth older sister? The meaning of the phrase experienced and knowledgeable was all-encompassing. Combined with the fact that Chin Ening had just accompanied them to the peace talks and was presented as a beauty to the presiding official of the show, this kind of experienced and knowledgeable became the greatest filth and derogatory in the eyes of the unmarried young misses. After hearing the sixth young miss's words, some of the sisters frowned. Some were worried, some were disgusted, and some, like Chin Ening, burst out laughing. Even the maidservants in the room couldn't help but blush when they saw this situation. If it was an ordinary girl, in this kind of situation, they would be so embarrassed that they would want to find a hole to hide in. Perhaps those who had a weaker tolerance would immediately bang their heads against a pillar to prove their innocence. However, Chin Ening only smiled and said, "Sixth younger sister, you flatter me. I have indeed seen a lot of things. Not to mention, sixth younger sister, you grew up at home and didn't see the hardships of life outside." During the peace talks between the two countries, Father's heroic appearance when he argued with the scholars. This kind of scene should be recorded in the history books. Older sister isn't talented, but I have seen a lot more than sixth younger sister. As for courage, I'm also a bit braver. Using little tales to deflect 1,000 caddies, she drew everyone's attention back to the sixth young miss, who was so scared that she wet her pants. The sixth young miss face immediately turned red. She glared at Chin Ening, and tears quickly gathered in her eyes. Chin Ening hurriedly coaxed her, "Sixth younger sister, what's wrong? Don't cry. My father's success in the peace talks is glorious in the history books. This is a joyous occasion for our family. Sixth younger sister, why are you crying? Or, do you mind, that kind of thing? It doesn't matter. Don't take it to heart. Who would talk nonsense about your matter outside? Even if grandmother dotes on you, she won't let others talk nonsense." The sixth young miss was so angry that her tears flowed, and she began to sob. The more she said this, the more it proved that the news of the sixth young miss peeing her pants had already spread throughout the entire residence. Even if no one said it, everyone knew about it. Old Madam touched her aching forehead and angrily rebuked, "All of you, behave yourselves. Such a big thing has happened, yet you still have the heart to bicker. You can't share the family's worries and only know how to cause trouble. What's the use of having a group of useless girls like you?" Seeing that Old Madam was angry, everyone stood up and respectfully saluted her. "Old Madam, please calm down." The sixth young miss also sobbed, and saluted with everyone. Old Madam frowned. Just as she was about to reprimand them, Mammy Chin brought up the brass tobacco pouch and pot that had been filled with tobacco. Old Madam's attention was diverted, and she stifled her anger in her heart. After taking a few puffs, she felt a bit better. Chin Ening smiled at the right time and said, "Old Madam, don't worry. I just met with Father." At this time, Father followed into the palace. Presumably, there's a banquet in the palace, and he will return to the residence soon. At that time, you will naturally be able to reunite with Father. She observed the old madam's expression and saw that although the old madam seemed to like it a bit, she was still frowning as usual. She then said, "Our family is now in a situation where the fire is adding oil to the fire and the flowers are blooming. Father has made a great contribution this time, and His Majesty will definitely reward him. At that time, he will bring honor to the family. It's also old Madam who has taught your son well." These words made old Madam's heart feel a lot better. She took a few puffs from the tobacco pouch and said, it could be considered that her anger had subsided. Seeing that Chin Ening coaxed old Madam to like it with a few words, everyone was relieved. Third Madam began to flatter her again, and everyone else followed suit. Only sixth young mistress cried with grievance. Chin Ening sat beside her and persuaded her in a low voice. From time to time, the two of them would raise their heads to look at Chin Ening and chatter for a while. Chin Ening didn't care about what they said about him behind his back. Only incompetent people who didn't dare to confront him head-on would gossip behind his back. Now that she had gone on a trip with her father, she had seen such a big battle and had also seen the bloodshed. She felt that her mind had been opened up a lot. This kind of trivial matter could no longer enter her eyes. It was only a matter of block soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. She was now worried about her father and mother. Also, who was the one behind this assassination attempt? She didn't care whether or not someone wanted the Dog Emperor's life, and she also didn't care whether or not the Demon Empress died. What she cared about was those people who dressed up as Dezhou's soldiers to target her father. Would these people fail and try again? If the Dian official who was in charge of the peace talks was assassinated right after the peace talks were successful, wouldn't it be a provocation to the Yin dynasty and Dezhou? The people of Dezhou would think that the Yin dynasty looked down on Dezhou or wanted to renege on their promise. The Dian dynasty would also suspect that Dezhou wanted to tear up the peace treaty. If Dezhou and Dian continued to fight, who would benefit from it? Would it be the Miaojiang that bordered Dian? Or would it be the Taitan in the north of Dezhou? Percent at this time, there was no banquet scene in the palace as Chin Ening had expected. The imperial study was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Qin Huaiyuan knelt on the shiny black marble floor. His expression was solemn as he lowered his head. The emperor paced back and forth in front of Qin Huaiyuan with his hands behind his back. Good job, good job. I have worked hard for this country for 35 years, and now I've been assassinated. Moreover, the people who tried to assassinate me were all these people. Your Majesty, please quell your anger. Qin Huaiyuan kowtowed. Quell my anger? How can I quell my anger? The emperor angrily grabbed the secret report that the silver-masked man had delivered and threw it in front of Qin Huaiyuan. Let me see it for myself. How can I quell my anger? Qin Huaiyuan's heart jumped. He lowered his head to read the contents of the secret report and was immediately shocked. His face instantly turned pale. Your Majesty. Qin Huaiyuan bowed to the ground and kowtowed 3 times. This official's family has always been loyal and devoted to your Majesty. Even if your Majesty wants this official to die, this official will not hesitate to do so. Your Majesty, please understand. Seeing that Qin Huaiyuan, who was usually like a celestial being, was really anxious, the emperor finally eased up a little. After thinking carefully, a smile appeared on the emperor's face. It was completely different from his previous anger. He gently helped Qin Huaiyuan up with one hand. Beloved official Qin, you have always served the country wholeheartedly. Right now, your wife is a guest in the emperor's palace. You've also read the secret report. Those people dared to assassinate me, so I can't let them live. Now, as long as you accompany me in this play, I will be at ease. I will also reward you generously. Qin Huayuan felt his hands and feet go cold. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.